So you came to me under some pretty precarious conditions. You approached me on Reddit, on my subreddit, and you offered some help, but
Yeah.
you were pretty secretive about who you are, what you do. You told me some pretty interesting points, data points about your life, which definitely piqued my interest. And I don't want to say anything about you because I don't even know your name. So why don't you just introduce yourself? You don't have to tell your name. That's fine.
Well, I don't.
I'm gonna respect your privacy here. But just for the audience, just say what you do, what are your credentials, maybe who you are, what your social security number is.
Well, I don't know your name either, man. So,
Yeah,
touche.
yeah. I'm on the shy
What's it?
side. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess first and foremost, I'm just a weird nerd. But that's how we all start out, isn't it? We all have a pretty same origin story
yeah,
on this side of the pond. So, I started out, I suppose, as kid messing around with different things that I had, and I guess my first glimpse into security was when I was a kid, and we never had internet growing up, so it was kind of a luxury we weren't rich enough for. So, but some of my neighbors did, and I ended up messing around with that sort of stuff and trying to guess the password. Hackerman, Lee 5000, ooh, and I ended up actually getting it, which was the scary thing, and so I from that was kind of the first kind of instance where I was like, oh damn, like people really aren't secure, although I didn't really understand it as deeply as that at that point. I ended up moving on and just tinkering around with things like PlayStation or whatever, and I could not break them. As I said, we weren't the richest family growing up, so what's a I take apart my PlayStation. That's never going. If I don't get it working again, it's never going to get anything else similar to it. Same with phones or whatever. So if something didn't work, I'd have to figure a way out to get it working again. So that's kind of where I came from. Moving on there from there, I actually got a job working with repairing devices. So repairing phones and computers and laptops, and I actually kind of bullshitted myself into that job. They're like, "Oh, do you have any experience? Do you know how to fix this? You know how to fix that?" And yeah, yeah, I know how to fix that. It's like I'd never done anything like that in my life. So I ended up learning everything off of YouTube, which was, oh God, I swear, everybody, YouTube's the best, probably one of the best inventions ever. I think, although it's gone downhill quite recently, I suppose, but at the time, it's just amazing. You could learn anything on it. I When I was working there, then I kind of realized the hardware side wasn't really my thing. I was good at it. I could fix phones and laptops and computers, and I went then from basic repairs onto component level. Fixing resistors and transistors that may burst on motherboards and main boards, but I had spent a good few years programming and coding by this stage and automating stuff, and I knew that kind of the software side was more my thing. So I ended up deciding, with some help from other people, some guidance, that IT security was kind of the area that I wanted to go into. As I said before, Elite Hackerman 5000, So I wanted to. That's it, man. It's from being yourself, these, they look cool, you see, anonymous on the television, they hacked this, that, and the other, and that's just how it started. That's how it started. It looks cool, and you want to do it. So I went in, and I ended up obtaining a degree in cybercrime and IT security. So my studies surrounded all manner of national and international law. Let me suffix that, I suppose, with saying that I'm not a lawyer, solicitor, barrister, what have you. So what I say regarding legislation is, of course, my interpretation of the law and not legal advice. I also studied the technical nature of IT security as it relates to securing physical and digital assets from adversaries. I won't get too in depth, I suppose, because we'd be here for hours, but a general overview is, computer science, computer hardware, then, of course, a focus on, computer programming, from low-level assembly for reverse engineering malware samples to high-level compiled and interpreted languages. I placed a major amount of time into studying software engineering, so data structures and algorithms, and a plethora of SDLC methodology, software development life cycles, because I really am a strong believer that in order to be good at breaking computers, or more specifically computer programs, you need to be well versed in how they're made. The other major facet of my learning was in networking. So I I'd been coding for years before, but I my first so that was grand. But when I went into college, that was my first real introduction to networking, and man, I was in heaven there. That was a dream in paradise. So after studying, like, the whole CCNA content, getting good with that, I went on to a wide range of, network attacks, and from there onto web application security at the application layer and just beyond. That's my bread and butter there. I learned that I wanted to be in offensive security. So I know a lot of people say that because it sounds cool, but I went through the ringer, trust me, in terms of the boring ass weeds that you need to pull through to learn anything in this industry. But uh, I've been through and I loved every bit of it. So I know that that's actually where I want to be. And I went then into working for red teaming, or working in red teaming for, some Fortune 500 companies in the financial sector specifically. And so there I got to kind of start working with some really cool stuff, right? Writing malware that actually gets executed on enterprise level networks. Uh, AV evasion, getting Cobalt Strike to beacons to pass enterprise level EDR solutions, AVs like CrowdStrike, like Symantec, SEP, S1, or Sentinel-1. And I can go into that later if you want. It is awesome. I took a really big research interest in studying AV evasion. That's awesome. Uh, a lot of contractual obligations in those sort of larger organizations, being financial sector related, required penetration tests to be done by independent third parties, which is great because, trust me, let me tell you, uh, internal teams have little power or interest really in really fixing core security issues until a third party raises them, because client contracts, up until the point that client contracts are on the line, that's then and only then does the company checkbook really come out to actually fund what needs to be funded in these large organizations. So I worked closely with these pen testing teams when they came in to do this sort of stuff, and that's where I wanted to be again. So I I I moved into pen testing then, where I work full time now, and I'm loving life. I perform external and internal infrastructure penetration tests, as well as web application security testing so far. From here, hopefully, I want to start using the company dime, I suppose, to rack up a bunch of certifications for myself, and then in the future, sometime, move into mobile security, as I feel that that's the next paradigm, the next big paradigm that we'll be shifting into, right? So I know that everybody uses mobile personally, but at the enterprise level, it's still heavily PC related, desktop related, whether that desktop be uh, Mac or Windows, and then obviously servers. But I think as we go forward, we're definitely going to be shifting more into mobile security, especially as everything, larger companies and organizations try to shift to mobile apps running everything. Look at banks, for example, stripping away in-person outlets or locations and replacing them with online, or saying, like, you can do this through your app, that sort of thing. So I definitely think we'll be moving into there. I feel like I'm rambling on a bit. Is that kind of covered what you wanted, or
No, no, no.
or
This is cool. This this has been really amazing to listen to, and I have way too many questions now. I mean, it's hard to imagine that this is all within just one lifetime, and not even that. Assuming I'm not, I'm assuming you're not 75 years old yet, and
No, no.
yeah, and you are actually living the life of that, cool Hackerman 5000 lead, whatever, and like you are a scary person because you can do some. I mean, you probably don't think about it this way, but you can do some damage.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm a very I I have a strong code of ethics, I'll say, that's been developed over years. Like, as I said, my first introduction to it was from thinking, like, Anonymous looked awesome, and then from there, it really co-developed my sort of interest in it from a technical perspective, and then my interest in data security and privacy from a political perspective. They kind of co-developed. So I'm very from a young age as well. So my ethics and is kind of well deeply ingrained into me, we'll say. Plus, you can make a lot of money doing it legally, so why would I risk going to prison for a long time doing it illegally? So I don't want to spend the rest of my days living in Russia. So poor Ed Snow. So like, yeah, I think I'll live my life. Yeah, but
Yeah, yeah. There is definitely a lot of money to be made in this field, and that's good because, at least from my research, that's very needed now because the cybercrime industry or market is growing so rapidly that there are these hacker groups popping up everywhere, and corporate networks are not, or government networks as well, are not that secure at all. There are plenty of
yeah,
cases where they are breaches and intrusions that could have been avoided if even basic security protocols were followed, and that goes even for like critical infrastructure stuff. So definitely people like you are needed, and I assume they are properly rewarded for their work. The only problem is, I think you kind of like briefly touched on this, is that internal teams, they don't really get enough funding or resources, or even attention for fixing the problems or pointing out the problems until you would hire a third party company, or even in a worst case scenario, you would have an incident happen, and then all of a sudden now you have to deal with millions of customer data records leaked on the dark net or whatever. So you're doing offensive security, correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Well, yeah. So in the offensive security, there is, like, I assume you're trying to help companies. You're doing penetration testing, so you're trying to help companies, find these bugs, but you're doing it in a way so that you don't actually do anything malicious to them. You're trying to disclose these bugs, but in the offensive security, you could also get paid to do this sort of work for maybe some law enforcement or intelligence companies wherever in the world, pretty much. And doing something like what the NSO group is doing, basically like hacking into, or selling or renting malware to hack into anyone without any sort of moral or ethical boundaries, hacking into journalists, activists, protesters, any sort of person of interest. And, so
yeah.
you mentioned that you do have ethics, and I'm pretty sure that you do. But like, you know what I'm saying? I'm kind of like interested in like this dynamic, like what makes a person choose the path to essentially be a white hat hacker in the offensive security scene versus being like complete, like, I don't care, I just want to make as much money as possible, selling malware.
Yeah, I'm not sure what get, maybe just a fear of prison, possibly, but
I mean, this is legal
I'm
work.
not.
You wouldn't go to prison for making malware for these malware brokers like the NSO or others.
All right, yeah, yeah. I am, yeah. Honestly, I think it comes down to capability, right? So there's quite a lot of super hyper unbelievable genius level people in this industry, right, who can do unbelievable things, and but they are a subset, a very small subset, possibly like the top 1%, top 5%. The other 95 to 99% of security professionals, I would say, are they're good at doing their job, but they wouldn't have an interest in going any further or going above and beyond in that regard. For example, I'd say with my in university, I'd say honestly, of the say few hundred people that were in my year group, there was maybe I met all of them, and maybe two or three other people actually had an interest in computers and thought that computers were cool and wanted to actually learn the science behind them, how they work, and get it. The rest of them, the other 95%, I'd say, they were either coming from second careers and wanted to get this degree to kind of shift into this industry, not because they had an interest in it necessarily, but because they thought they heard it could be high paying, so they wanted to get those jobs where other industries may have failed them. And of that group then of people who are really interested and really good at this stuff. Again, I think it's more to do with, there are, again, I'd split those remaining people into two factions, right? So there'd be the people who are into the security and are into the politics of it, right? So they understand this NSO group stuff, not just from a technical level, like, oh God, this is the way that they're, exploiting the PDF parsers, the black and white parsers in the iPhones, iMessage software to get remote code execution, versus the ones who understand that, but then think about it more from an ethics side or from a politics side of okay, now that's terrible. That could be a danger to our democracy, right? Because I think I seen uh, an article just today in the Guardian, I believe, that said that Citizen Lab said that they in Canada said that they had warned Number 10 Downing Street in the UK about the NSO group actually using that um, Pegasus malware to target Number 10 and target the Prime Minister's office in the UK. And when you're looking at that, it's coming from two different sides, right? So we have the guys who don't care necessarily. They're just in it for the money. They want an easy enough job as a security engineer, just trucking along in their company. They'll engage with the developers of certain softwares and tell them, oh, these scanners picked up this vulnerability, and have them remediate that. And then there's the other side who actually take an active approach and think that, fighting the bad guys is what we're here to do. We're the good guys, and we need to make sure that this is secure, because most people don't realize just how much our world is really run on computers, and just how much damage can be done if, like, the bad guys win, you know. And I think I heard a good saying, I can't source it, if somebody knows, like, they can mention it. I have no idea where it came from, but I heard a good saying. It was like, our world is held together by duct tape and chewing gum, and nobody knows. Everybody's just oblivious to it. Like, we're trucking. Like, if everybody really understood just how bad things were, they'd never use computers again. Like, everything is built from your, like, critical infrastructure is like dependent on, like, has old code dependencies written written 20 years ago in COBOL and, and hasn't been looked at since. And that could have critical vulnerabilities that maybe didn't even exist before. Like, these aren't known vulnerabilities that could have existed at the time. And they're still running on it now. And there's 100% as it gets leaked, ideas that say state actors are infiltrating critical infrastructure, and it's 100% happening. And it's more of a matter of good versus bad here, right? What side do you want to be on? Pick it. And I think I like to think, I like to believe personally that most people are want to be inherently good. Maybe not the maybe not everybody, but I like to believe that most people just want to be good, I suppose, or they don't have malicious intent in what they're doing. And that small subset of people who do are going to do it regardless, whether it be in the IT security field or not, right? And a lot of these attacks are being done either by, or they're being facilitated either by nation state actors, in which case you're screwed either way. You don't even have to worry about those guys, because if somebody has time, like basically unlimited resources where they do not need to make a profit, and all they have to do is sit down and spend their days 9 to 5 or longer at examining in detail your infrastructure, your applications, looking for a vulnerability, and then once they penetrate that security perimeter and get onto your network, all they have to do is figure out, okay, do a bit of enumeration and see, okay, what are you running, what are we doing, and then they need to develop their tools to avoid that. There's nothing that we're going to do there to protect against that. Not at a large scale, maybe at a smaller scale, but nothing too large, not like Fortune 500 level or critical infrastructure level, because there's just too many people at play, and the people are the real failure in any security system. As the saying goes, you can have a 100% technically secure system in theory, but as long as a human is interacting with that system, there's always going to be at least that one vulnerability there, and that's the problem. And then the other side of the group, which is more what these larger organizations need to contend with, are not really your 16-year-old with a computer sitting in his bedroom type DOSing your systems, but more so the cyber criminal gangs, which are, for the most part, normally an extension of existing criminal gangs, right? So organized criminal groups, um, they use this cyber world to as another paradigm to shift into. So I suppose the question, if you want to bring it back to, is like, what makes somebody want to be a regular gangster versus a regular citizen? What makes a banker want to just do regular legal banking versus money laundering? It's the same in this industry as it is in the others. It just in a different format, I suppose.
So, in your many, many years of experience, this is your conclusion that the situation is so dire that people wouldn't want to even use computers if they realized how vulnerable they are and how everything is integrated into these vulnerable systems.
Yeah, 100%.
Damn.
Like there's a funny meme I seen a couple of years ago, and it just stuck with me ever since. It was like tech enthusiasts use technology. They have their iPhones, their MacBooks, they have their Alexa or Siri or Google products, their voice recognition service they're running, and they have 20 of them around their houses, and they have security cameras set up with Wi-Fi over the internet. And it's like, whereas people who actually work in security It's like, the newest piece of technology I own is a is a radio from the 90s, and I keep a pistol loaded in my bedside table in case it makes a squeak that I don't understand. That's 100% true. Like, I don't really use um my phone very much. If ever, I kind of leave it away, and that's not necessarily what the average person should do per se. I'm not advising that, because it's about your threat model, it's about your what you're looking at there, what your real target is that you're trying to defend against, right? But it's just so ingrained in you after a while, the paranoia, I suppose, because you just realize it's not secure. There's no making it secure. There's too many years built on top of this, of just crap, basically built layered on top of layers on top of layers of crap and crap and crap. And now we're at a stage where um all of these old companies, right, the ones that go back 100 years plus, like, obviously predating modern computers, but they've developed these systems since the initial development of computing, or at least the widespread adoption of it. And so, as I said, this is every year. It's crap. It's programs on top of programs on top of programs. There's still major companies that are running still with the rather than having that sort of um what's the word I'm looking for, instead of like running that distributed systems model, like, they're still running that single computer doing everything, processing every instruction, every piece of user data, and it's just single point of failure. And what happens if, and these are mostly, for the most part, banking companies, insurance companies, running with mainframe computers is what I'm looking for. It's not distributed the load across things. It's all running on one mainframe system. And what happens if your bank just can't do it anymore, right? And one example actually that I do have was, just off the top of my head, I can't give specifics because I don't really remember the specifics, but it was a bank in the Republic of Ireland. I think it was called Ulster Bank, maybe. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, the specific bank, but you'd be able to find it, I'm sure, from the story I tell. It was like a good few years ago, and like that, there was one bad piece of code pushed, right? One bad piece of code pushed, and it destroyed everything, right? So it went through that mainframe system, and that mainframe system distributed that out to every other little facet of their code throughout their entire infrastructure. Everything that ran had this bad piece of code running in it, and it destroyed everything. There was no backups, there was no nothing. It just needed to be completely rebuilt from scratch. And what happened? It took weeks where people could not access their money. They couldn't. They just couldn't.
Oh my
People were
God.
going with paper slips trying to get checks, trying to get their money out. They just didn't have access to it, period. And when they did finally rebuild the system, there was some money missing in some accounts, and there's the question going, right? So it takes weeks to go back because they're trying to audit these accounts to make sure that no accounts have even a cent missing, because if they come back online and there's even 1 cent missing out of one person's account, the regulators are up your arse there and you're screwed. So
Oh my God.
and that's just one example from one company in one place, and that's not even the worst of it, right? So it just gets worse as you go on. And this is just one example of how, like, the years of just crap that builds up over time, how it can have such a negative effect that nobody even thinks about, and how limited the access controls are in these major organizations, how limited um auditing of code goes, how limited the anything. Like, I remember, like, some places I worked in, and there was like interns pushing code to production, like with no checks going on, and it's just like, what are you doing? I don't know. But yeah, like if keep going the way you are, either be oblivious or don't, but beware when you enter into that world. It's scary, man. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned you mentioned something that I want to go back to, but I actually have a question regarding this bank. This happened recently, like in modern times.
And maybe like 10, like in the, I'm pretty sure it was in the 2010s, like, so
Oh,
so
okay.
not too long ago, but
Yeah.
maybe like near in the last 10 years, I'd say maybe.
Yeah, but something like this could happen even today or tomorrow or any day. You said there is no making it secure. So when it comes to a bank, you know, is it possible to just completely take down a bank?
Well, I'd say you can make it secure, but the problem is there's no incentive to do that. Um,
Hmm.
like working in these major like financial companies, you have two layers, right? I think once a company reaches a certain size, it goes, you have your 20 layers of just management, and there's there's very little focus on the actual technicals here, right? The security teams, unless there is severe regulatory restrictions on these companies, they're going to let it slip. They're not going to do it, especially like, these some of these companies may operate in Europe, but they may be based primarily out of America, and America doesn't have near as strong of um, regulations as Europe does, and so and really they only really care about America's regulations, right? Because what's going to happen, they pay their 50 grand fine to the EU or something, and it's like, what's that? It's nothing, absolutely zero. They don't care. It's really not worth it to them. It's more worth it to, it costs more less to pay the fine than it costs to fix the problem. So you just keep trucking along after that, right? The only time I ever seen it actually be an issue that got resolved was one time there was a serious security breach that was kept private, and uh, one of the major executives up there, up at the top, like CEO, CTO level, um, they were told by regulators in a certain jurisdiction that there could be personal liability for this problem. They could like personally face criminal liability for this problem. And the second that the word personal liability was thrown in the mix, a blank check was put on the table, and they said, do whatever needs to be done. I don't care. I don't give two shits. Write down the number, put as many zeros behind it as you want to make this go away. And just short of personal liability being put on the table, I don't think they really give two shits. Like,
Oh my God.
Now the people in the companies, they want to do it. It's not your average Joe Schmo. It's not your average security engineer or security analyst in the company. Especially coming into it, as I did, as many people did, they really, really, really want to actually make a difference. They're thinking, I'm gonna go and get employed with this company. They're a big company. They have a great name. We're going to help secure them. We're going to protect people's data, especially financial data. That's the most sensitive that you can probably get, bar maybe health records. And we're going to do a good job. And then what happens? They go in, and over months and over years, they get just their will beaten out of them because they find a problem, as I have. You find a problem, you bring it to management. How much is it going to cost to fix? It's going to cost maybe 3 weeks of our 10-man team's time, plus maybe 500 grand to implement a new solution that will monitor this system for us and take that off our hands so that we no longer have to worry or look at this problem again. It'll all be passed over to another solution. And then they look back and they think, is that in your budget for this year? No, no, we've already spent our budget on everything else. This is why we're coming to you. We need extra money. It's like, not much I can do for you there, lad. Sorry. And it just gets thrown back in your face. And it's like, okay. And then it's frustrating. It's the frustration. I felt it. Lots of people felt it, especially the teams I worked on. We talked about it openly, or well, maybe not openly, but openly on the team, but obviously hidden from the managers. And talked about it, saying like how frustrated we all are that like we're identifying these vulnerabilities, we're calling them out, we're trying to explain in as clear language as possible the ramifications that these could have down the line, and the possible business impact that this could have down the line. And what happens? It's ignored, or it's okay, yeah, put it on the list and we'll get to it eventually, and it's put on the list, it's ignored, never get back to it. Maybe 6 months down the line, a penetration test, a third party comes in, finds the same problem, exploits it, um, puts it in critical level on their testing report, and then comes back to management. They read it and they come back to the team and then try and go ham on us, like saying, why wasn't this fixed or solved? And we're like, we documented this months ago, we put it on your hands, and it was ignored. And that's just case after case. It constantly happens. The frustration builds, and over time, look, what do the teams do? These internal teams just decide, well, look, we'll document everything and we'll have it on record. We'll have the executives risk accept everything, have it in writing that they've accepted the risk for these problems, so that they can't sack us in 6 months when it's actually exploited by a penetration testing team. And the worst part is if a pen testing team can exploit this, then it's only a matter of time before a pen testing team, mind you, that's black box, has no information. If they can do that, then a criminal organization can do it if they want to target you, yeah, because they're in the same boat there, and that's the problem.
Yeah, this is what I've read so many times when I was reading these stories that security teams, they're not really being listened to, and it kind of like in the corporate environment, this is something that you are, if you do your job well, then nothing happens. You don't have results to show. You're trying to prove a negative. You're trying to prove something that, well, because of our work, we probably prevented an X amount of attacks that could have happened on our network, and the corporate environment would be looking at you like, what is this? This is not numbers. This is speculation. Like you don't know if an attack would happen on our network. Like that's not a concern for us. Like, and they don't want to give you the resources to do your job.
Yep, yeah, 100%. And that's the conversation that's had openly with CISOs and the likes, the chief executives who are responsible for that, for representing security teams at the executive level or at the board level, with company boards, is that's what they express openly, is how, look, the fact of the matter is, until something happens, it's hard to impossible to get extra funding, because there's no real way to do it. They're trying desperately to identify ways that they can sell this to the board or sell this to the chief executive to say, uh, we can't give you a financial way that this will say increase our bottom line, or minimize potential payouts that we might have to pay in the future, because they haven't happened yet. But they will happen at some point eventually, and it'll cost a heck of a lot more to fix it down the road than it will to repair this now. And that's exactly what you said, was just hitting the nail in the coffin there. It was just spot on. It was just, you know, it's hard to prove the value in the work that you do when there's no uh, immediate financial or ever, like, right? So if you repair a vulnerability and that vulnerability costs, say it costs 100 grand in downtime because you had to shut down 18,000 systems for 24 hours to implement a patch that required a system restart. Say that happened and that cost 100 grand. Well, now, how do you justify that cost in the future, right? So it's very easy to say, okay, well, you've just been hit now with this ransomware attack, we'll say, and it's going to cost 10 million to fix. That would be fine. And we'd say, okay, you could pay the 10 million ransom, or you could spend the 100 grand and we could just reset the systems. That's a very easy monetary thing to weigh, right? The business people can weigh those two and say, all right, 10 million's a lot more than 100 grand, so we go with that. There you go, no problem. But if we say this now, in the present, that an attack could happen in the future, that's a risk now that they're trying to weigh against. And it's like, okay, well, we're weighing the probability that this attack might happen in the future versus you wanting to take 100 grand off me now, you know. And it's like that possibility very uh, very rarely wins out, um unless 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 it's a very major, say, very publicly exposed vulnerability, right? So think SolarWinds, for example, when
Hmm.
that happened a few years ago. Um, when that happened, or Log4j or something like that, when these like really highly publicized vulnerabilities came out, they had the backing solely because newspapers are writing about them. So clients are now sending in requests saying, what have you done? Have you looked into this vulnerability? Is it repaired? And they cannot write back and say, yes, it's non-existent unless it is. So they will have you implement a fix real quick so that they can respond to their clients and say, yeah, we are on top of security, repaired instantly, couldn't have been done better job. May if clients are asking, then it'll get fixed because that's a more immediate, like, in your eyes benefit. But yeah, it's really hard to justify such a high cost, or just any cost really, because they have a profit incentive. It's hard to justify that cost for security before security incidents happen. you know.
Yeah. Yeah, these companies, they oftentimes even know, because you continuously make them aware of the problems. They are running on legacy code, they're running on old systems. There are these problems that have been in place for years and they need to be fixed. And they are still pretending like nothing bad is going to happen. Like that doesn't concern them. Like it happens to all these other companies, it doesn't happen to us. It seems to me like this is what they're doing.
Yeah, I one good example I'll say is, we had one time I seen passwords, we'll say, for example, right? So
Mm.
like we found Kerberos to the system. We found, long story short, one attack versus the other enumeration, get password hash dumps, and we find that with some very simple word lists, just rock you, man, like as basic as you can get. Because this is what I always try to ensure when I'm doing, when I was doing red teaming, was like I could very easily write up my own malware, and uh, if it doesn't have a signature and the person writing it has any sort of half decent clue of what they're doing, or puts 10 minutes of research into it, it's not getting detected by any AV or EDR solution. So I always try and work from for example, using Cobalt Strike beacons with default settings, and not modifying those exfiltration payloads to say, or those beacons call homes to say, to try and hide them or anything like that. I always try and use default things because even the defaults still break it, and still get past security even today. And it's like, what's the point in even trying anything more advanced if your security posture isn't even strong enough to detect known existing threats that should be very simple to detect. Um, One example I seen on Twitter actually was, because we have to stay up to date with this sort of stuff, so you have to be on it. But one example I seen was one dude talking like, and it was so true. It's like all of these companies worried about Log4j, and but Mimikat still runs on your computer on corporate networks 100% of the time, and it's so true. Like, this Mimikat's this software, it still runs, and it runs perfectly well, and it runs on probably 9 times out of 10 with minimal obfuscation whatsoever. And this is probably one of the most famous softwares in the world for testers to use, and probably second only to Metasploit or something like, or like, probably only second to that in terms of fame, and it still gets passed. So what's the point, like, at this stage? And they have no sense, or there's no want to do it at this stage. Sorry, I've got a bit off track. I think if you want to rein me back in
No,
to
no,
what you wanted.
no, you're doing great, man. I mean, I'm not trying to read too much into you, but from what I'm hearing is that you kind of sound like a frustrated man because from your story that you told me, you love this technology like you were born a hacker, like in the true sense of the word, meaning that the original hackers in the 80s and 90s, these were people that just loved the technology and they just wanted to explore it and they believed in like this idea that that information should be free, so they should be free to break into other people's stuff and just look around and they were not necessarily trying to do any harm. There were some people like that, but they were just like looking around and maybe some stealing some corporate documents sometimes, but not trying to do too much damage. And it's kind of like from what I've sensed from these people is they kind of like get addicted to this technology and they really like they cannot stop. Like they just have to do this. They just have to break stuff and modify it. Just hack it. Like the broadest sense of the word hack, they want to do that. And I feel like this is
Yeah,
this is you. Like you're not someone, as you mentioned in your cybersecurity degree, that there's a lot of these people that just want to switch careers because it pays better. But you are in this, like you love this. You're inspired by this, just by this technology. And now you are seeing how the world around you, how everyone around you, most of the time, is just like bastardizing this technology. They're just pretending like it's all hunky dory and nothing bad is ever gonna happen. And you just want to say them. You just want to point out that there are all of these problems. This is not really secure. This is like we should really do something about this, and no one is listening to you.
yeah, 100%. Like
Oh
that.
man.
That's it exactly. Like, as I said, I just love doing this stuff, and I take a real interest in it. And as you said, it's frustration, and it's not just in me. I've seen it in the teams that I've worked with as a whole, because a lot of them love it the way I do, the way a lot of people do. It's fun to do. Like, a lot of us can't believe, like, we're getting paid to do this. Like, not that it's about the money, but the fact that, like, we get to do something this awesome, this fun, and we get to make a living doing it. It's just unbelievable. But as I said, you know, you get that excitement bashed out of you when you realize that how the world really works and how business really works, and how the fact of the matter is, um, it's all about money. It's all about the bottom line. It's all about how much money you can make or how much money you can save, and there is no other way about it. Absolutely everything. And that's as open, and they will tell you, and it's told to everybody coming in. And after that, it's anything you want to propose or anything you want to do or anything you want to implement has to be sold in a way, or in from a position of how much money could this make the company, or how much money could this save the company. It has to have a financial incentive behind it to do it. It can't be, it can't, and it has to be hard. It has to be a hard number. It can't be, um, well, this could save money in the future. It has to be a hard number that they can get behind and that they can sell, because they all these business people, look, personally, I'm a man of science. I'm not into any pure sciences myself. They interest me, but I'm not that smart. I'll say I'll stick to my applied sciences, where I can kind of get a grasp of what's going on. But these people try and peg themselves, these business majors try and peg themselves as, we only care about the facts and we only care about the hard numbers. We only care about what can be proved. And instead of that, and it's just bullshit, because what do you mean by that? Like, no, you don't care about the facts. Like, at least in an actual, from looking and examining something from a scientific perspective, there is the quantitative data, but there's also qualitative data that we can take into account. Although we can't um although we can't necessarily use that from a metrics point of view, qualitative data is used all the time. Look at medicine, look at other fields. Um, it's weighing the pros and the cons. It's not just about hard numbers. It's not just about hard facts. And although I would argue that there is a lot of hard facts here, because if 20 other financial companies are being hit by the same problems, what makes you any different? There is no difference, you know? Oh, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
it's just incredible.
Yeah. You're blaming the profit incentive a lot for this, and do you see a way out of
Oh,
this?
sorry, yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, like, I don't want to come across like that. Like, on the one hand, yeah, okay, it is a big problem. However, if you look at government agencies, they're just as bad, if not worse. At least the private companies, they have um they have clients that may be trying to hold them accountable, or they may have contractual obligations that they need to require, or they may have regulatory scrutiny that they may need to try and avoid or work their way around. However, when you look at government sector, and non-profit sector, it's just as bad, if not worse. Um, I know of, like, I know from people that I know, um, who work in the government sector, say, developing websites. Now, not obviously working directly for the government, but working as contractors for developing those. Like, you're having people who are, never mind interns, you're having people who haven't even completed uh, education. Now, I'm not saying that you need a degree to go and do this stuff. Of course, it's very well known that you do not need a degree to go into this industry. But you're having, as I said, 95% of these people that are going through these courses have no interest in it. And I know for a fact a heck of a ton of people are passing without with very, very extremely minimal levels of knowledge of the subject matter. It's very, very unbelievably easy to pass, say, undergraduate degrees. When you get into the graduate level, it's a bit different, but it's very unbelievably easy to pass undergraduate degrees if you put any degree of effort into it whatsoever. And that's the problem. You're having these people who have no interest in the subject. You're having these people have no who couldn't give less of a shit personally about it, and you're having them uh, going and developing, who haven't even finished their courses learning how to develop this sort of stuff, and you're having them go and develop your software and your, like, nation level software. Like, I found on uh, a certain country's military website, I found an information disclosure issue whereby you click a simple link, and you click that link, and the link is bad. Okay, so what does it do? Does it spit up a 404? No, it spits up a nice informational page telling me the exact server number that this military organization is using, the exact model that they're using, the exact version number of the model of the system that they're using, which is about 10 versions out of date with several known vulnerabilities in it. And, like, uh, these vulnerabilities could be patched, sure, but you're using severely out of date software. And then on top of that, you're telling people the exact version number of that out of date software that you're using. And then on top of that, you're telling them the framework upon which your application is built. So the problem with all of this information is you're disclosing this to anybody who wants to look. And regardless, I don't know. I did not check and confirm whether any of these vulnerabilities that are known in the software versions were patched or not. They could have been, they could not be. Judging by knowing people, I doubt it was, but I'm hardly going to be going and checking that because that crosses that legal line where I don't want to get in trouble. But
Yeah.
so you need to rein in your curiosity a bit, even if you don't want to do damage. But like if you build your applications and your software on out of date, insecure software, then it's making it harder to maintain. It's making it harder to identify vulnerabilities that do exist, and it's making it, which indirectly becomes a security issue in and of itself, right? And I'm confident that there would have been many vulnerabilities in this version, and I'm confident that although their defense in the matter, because I did notify them of it and I said how absolutely ridiculous it was, especially after other high profile similar attacks were performed. Um, I, the defense to that was, well, our internal systems are air gapped, so this system doesn't really have that much sensitive data on it. Like, I don't care if it doesn't have that much sensitive data. What is that much sensitive data? Sensitive data is sensitive data. Like, what? It doesn't have that much. What? What are you telling me here? It only has Jerry's credit card number. Is that it? Like, what is it? Like, what is this sensitive data that it holds? You just told me that it holds some sensitive data. You know, like it's a problem in the public sector. It's a problem in the private sector. Which one is worse? I don't know. Public sector development, like is severely underfunded in the same way that private sector development is underfunded, because regardless on how you want to look at it, money's going missing. Money isn't going to the right places in any government. No government's perfect in this world. So it's like every single other project that they have to deal with. It's getting underfunded, and yeah, even though it could cost hundreds of millions down the line, take high profile um, medical attacks that have happened in recent years over the last 10, 20 years, like there last year or the year before with the HSE in Ireland, or a few years before that with the NHS in the United Kingdom, or even in between those, or more recently the attacks on several healthcare institutions in the United States. It's hard to sell it in the set, like these all have to fight for funding in the same way that private sector has to fight for funding, and they need to sell it in the same way that uh, security analysts in a private company need to sell it.
Yeah, from my reading of the situation is that no one on the individual, corporate, or any kind of institutional level is taking this seriously. Everyone is underestimating this whole situation. I remember when I was at school, I told my friend that in the future, and I was like kind of meant like by now, we would all have to be vigilant about our own security. We would have to like consciously like do cybersecurity on everyday basis the same way like we wash our hands and do like basic hygiene, or like clean our homes or lock our doors. We would have to do that with our phones, with our banking, with everything. We would have to be extremely vigilant. And she told me like, no, I don't think we would have to do that. Like, I don't think the situation is gonna require that. And at the time I was writing a paper on the cybersecurity strategy of the United States, and my conclusion basically was there is none. There is no strategy. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like there is like no unified body that would actually even like oversee this in the United States, and I'm not sure how it is anywhere else, but in the States, you have Cybercom, which is in the same building as the NSA, and the NSA is not even a military organization. They're technically civilian, part civilian, part military, and they are not doing anything to fix this problem because they're hyper focused on offensive military projects, which is just weaponizing exploits and making sure that you have your arsenal so that you can go after foreign targets, and just collect as much data as you can. They are not thinking about securing the infrastructure at all. And it's kind of like, 9/11 happened because nobody took that threat seriously. The pandemic happened because you could argue that the pandemic happened that because no one took that threat seriously. You would have epidemiologists who would come come out publicly year after year, warning about, like we are long overdue for a very strong pandemic. They usually would say that it could be something like a bird flu. So we got lucky with COVID, you could say. But this is the same thing here. And no one is paying attention. No one is listening. No one is saying anything. And it's it's sort of like no one even knows what could happen because some people have warned that there would be some sort of cyber Pearl Harbor, speaking of the American centric perspective, or cyber 9/11, again, American centric, but cyber Armageddon, something like that. I'm not sure
yeah,
how these
yeah,
scenarios are even possible because, you can easily overblown this, in these hypothetical sci-fi scenarios, but it is real. Like the WannaCry worm, that we got lucky that it got stopped at I think it was stopped in the UK by a researcher there. So we got lucky.
yeah. Marcus Hutchins.
Yeah. So like I don't know. I don't know what could be done to change this mindset. Do you think that people would only change their minds about this after something serious would happen?
Yeah,
Oh.
100%. Simple answer. Let's move on. No, I would say 100% yes. You see, for example, and even if something serious happens, it's not going to change anything, in my opinion. Like, although, I go through optimistic phases. I know I listen to a bunch of your previous podcasts, and about, and it's the same thing. Like, I go through my doomer phases, and and I try my best to stay optimistic, like, because it's very, very easy to go down a bad rabbit hole here when you look into this stuff and think things are just beyond repair at this stage. Nobody cares. Nobody will ever want to care. It's just they don't care about privacy. They don't care about security, and it's never going to get nothing's going to get done about it. But I try my best to be optimistic. But as I said, what I think would happen, in my opinion, is something like what happened in the UK and in Ireland. Uh, Take the most recent example was that attack on the health service executive in Ireland. Um, I can't remember which group it was, but one of the cyber criminal gangs, as you know, they got ransomware in. It was on same story as the rest of them. The systems were using like Windows XP at the latest. You
Oh my
know,
God.
the good systems were using Windows XP, and and it infects it. It gets in because, right, have to be reliant on these systems because, again, profit incentive. Private companies that develop software for MRI machines and other machines, they only develop it working for these older Windows Vista, Windows 98, Windows XP systems. So you can't really upgrade past it, and they don't have a profit incentive to upgrade their software to work on modern systems. So it just stays the way it is. Uh, and look, if that needs to be a problem, that's a problem for their internal security teams to solve by air gapping those systems and upgrading the rest of the systems in the hospital that don't need to be at that level. But it didn't get done. lots of systems were using extremely, unbelievably outdated software from 90s to early 2000s or earlier. And it's like, what happened? They got in, they stole everything, right? So in Ireland, they use their version of the social security number. In the United States is the personal public service number. Um, and those numbers were stolen en masse. I'm talking probably because the HSE and the way Ireland's system works, health system works, close to, if not everybody, close to every single person in the country probably had their social security number stolen, had their medical information stolen, had their. Now, I have to say, little bit of speculation going on there as a preface. If anybody looks it up, you're not going to find their uh, National Cybersecurity Center admitting that. They're not going to find anybody else. But they exfiltrated data, and there is the resulting evidence that this data is out there. Right? It was exposed. There was bits of it leaked on the dark web. Um, there was lots of it put up for sale, and that is a fact that is verifiable. Now, I know for a fact that hundreds of people, just that I'm within a few steps of knowing, like maybe like second person, are receiving personalized attacks, like phone calls coming up, automated phone calls that are spoofed saying they're from their own phone number, and they're getting those phone calls, it's coming up, and they're telling them over the phone their social security number, their PPSN in Ireland, of course, but they're telling them their PPSN over the phone. Now imagine in America if 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 300 million Americans had their social security numbers given away. Imagine if that happened. And then imagine if there was even 100 people who got phone calls and had stories written about them of getting phone calls from their own phone number or a digit off or so, and then them being told their social security number over the phone. Excuse me, the amount of fraud that can happen now from this stage. Even their police service was very open about the fact that there's going to be a hell of a lot of fraud going on over the next few years because now loans can be taken out in their name, you know? Identity theft can be a huge thing for anybody in the country if you get your hands on this data set. You know, we're talking medical records, we're talking family connections and their medical records, social security numbers, phone numbers, email addresses, the most sensitive information you can possibly get. And my criticism of that is the fact that this data must have been stored illegally. There's no way in hell that these attackers, even after getting access to the system, and even if they exfiltrated this data, there's no way that that should have been in a format that they could read. You know, this should have all been encrypted. This should have all been secured, and the key is to decrypt them. Should not have been accessible if they were encrypted at all. Honestly, by the fact they're using such old systems that got infected, I, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me they were holding everybody's information in plain text. I don't know. They probably were encrypted and they just got the keys in a text file somewhere. Obviously, I'm just joking. I have no idea what happened, but there is whatever did happen. There's no circumstances under which they should have been able to read the data or obtain people's personal data. This as just about as sensitive of data as you can possibly get in a format that's readable to humans. It should not, from a technical perspective, from a legal perspective, it should not have happened. Period. End of story. There's no other way about it. What's the result of this? Sorry for going off on that tangent, but getting back to your question and to your main point, like with regards, what was the result of that? This is the biggest attack on the infrastructure in years, and experts, security experts from all around the world have been warning, especially European security experts, have been warning about Ireland's failure to implement proper security measures and the government's failure to invest in their own security for the future, right? Because Ireland is a pacifist country. They are, um, they are, what do you call it? They're neutral in any conflicts that happen, and they rely on that neutrality for their own security. Every country loves Ireland. They don't have problems with Ireland, you know. Um, but in the cyber world, what they don't seem to grasp, at least from a viewer's perspective on the outside, they do not seem to grasp the idea that um, in the cyber realm, there is no borders. You don't have Britain on one side, America on the other to shield you from an attacker coming in. You know, there's you can be hit. Anybody can be hit. The people who got them, if you can trust what reports said about it, the attackers didn't even know that they were getting a health service. It wasn't targeted. It just got there, and they took advantage of it when they got there. They thought they had hit a university. Like, what can you do? And luckily enough, they voluntarily gave back the keys to decrypt all the data because it shut down the country. Um, what's it? Non-essential healthcare appointments had to be cancelled. Some surgeries had to be cancelled. Only emergency like A&E type or emergency room type appointments got to be if people were hit by a car, they'd be in and they'd be sorted with a doctor. But people who had um non-essential healthcare appointments or treatments that needed to be done, they were cancelled because digital records were gone. They had to revert back to using paper records again because they were all gone. Now, luckily, the bad guys in this instance, they seen the damage that was happening. They probably felt bad, and they gave the decryption keys back so that they could decrypt everything and get operations running again. But they still held the um, all the data and were extorting them for money. They still said they wanted, I can't remember how many, like a few million euro probably worth of Bitcoin as payment for the ransom to not release the data. But they never paid it. The government said that they're not paying it. So it's the Irish police force said that they're not paying it. So the data is up there for sale. But like I never heard anything of it after that. But somebody got it and somebody's using it for bad purposes because, as I said, it's having a real effect on real people in the country. And again, another tangent, but sorry. But back to your question on people's on the effect of this. That regarding Ireland, that was a so-called Pearl Harbor attack on Ireland. That was the biggest cyber attack ever in the history of that state. Um, and and what was the response? Well, there was mass criticism of the government and of the health services security team and of the so-called National Security Center or National Cyber Security Center, rather. And what did they do? Well, the the health services budget was increased by something along the lines of, I don't have the exact number with me, but maybe 1%. Like, now they say the number and they say, oh, it's however many million euro or 10 million euro being reinvested. But when you actually look at that from a percentage wise, it's nothing, you know? And what? Like, that money is not being given to the health service specifically on condition of it being used for security. It's just being given to them. And they're so underfunded, they're going to just, really, is any of it going to get to them? I don't know. Uh, and what's happened? Fast forward a few months, however long it's been, probably half a year to a year now later, everybody's forgot about it.
Mm,
Back to normal.
yeah.
I think that the only situation in which there could be any potential, maybe serious change is if it results in people dying.
Mm,
How would that happen? Look, for example, in I think it was was the United States. Do you remember, like last year, they found that they were in their water treatment plants they had hacked, and they like
Mm-hmm.
accidentally like messed around there. Now, imagine a situation where in water treatment facilities, there are specific chemical balances and stuff that are mixed into water supplies to treat them, to cure them, right? Now, I'm not in no way an expert or in no way knowledgeable on these systems, but in theory, just as an example, as a thought experiment of how something like this could happen, what if these systems are internet attached? Or what if these systems are attached to a network at all? You know, if in any way whatsoever there is a computer that digitally sets these values to be mixed, then there is a potential there for that computer to be attacked and to be compromised, and for those values to be modified. Look at the way the famous attack that America did not do against I think it was Iran, with their nuclear situation going on there. What was it called?
Stuxnet.
Uh, Stuxnet,
Yeah.
yeah. Exactly, and how they infiltrated this air gapped system, you know, so on and so forth. This totally secure air gapped system, and they got in there. They monitored the system for months, collecting data, real data, and then what did they do? They displayed fake data to the screen, and then they obviously had nuclear experts who knew what the hell they were doing with actually modifying the real values that were going on, and they ended up destroying however many silos that they had in there with regard to the reactors that they had, and it pushed them back however many years, so on and so forth. You can go up look up the story if you want to, but I'm talking about that sort of a similar situation going on. It's happened with Stuxnet. It can happen. And if there's any sort of critical infrastructure, or even in hospitals, if it happens to hit hospitals and take out their supply in the middle of a critical operation, on somebody's life, what if this machine gets hit, or power gets cut uh, during a critical operation. You're in the dark. Oh no, somebody slipped. You got cut. They're dead. They bleed out. It can happen very easily. Our world relies so deeply on technology, um, like things that you don't even realize are running on computers. Some people have smart fridges and and smart kettles that can be hacked and play these tunes, and it's like it can happen in so many ways, and it will happen. I'm confident in the fact that, sadly, at some point, somebody will die as a result of a cyber attack, and I only think that under that circumstances, maybe it might be taken seriously. But uh, like 9/11, God forbid, um, not that, not to say that it's been forgotten or anything, but what happened with that? Like, Patriot Act, lots of powers taken. Have you really seen any benefit from it? Like, the TSA posts pictures of toy plastic guns they seized off of children who were playing with them. They don't actually seize really very much of any value. You know, like, do you really get a value for it for what the powers that they've taken at the same time? And this is the way in that we're balancing here. So yeah, I think there's very, unless something serious happens like that, like there is a Pearl Harbor 9/11 cyber version, where people die, I don't think it'll be taken seriously.
I mean, when 9/11 happened and then the Patriot Act um, was signed into law, there is like no evidence after all those years that the reform of the TSA actually did something. It didn't. There is no proof that it actually did prevent any sort of new attack or something like that. And the same goes for the NSA. I think when Snowden leaked the documents, someone from the NSA said they prevented something like 50 attacks. out of all those data, millions
Yeah.
of people that they collected data on. But even though all of those 50, not a single one actually involved an American citizen. They were all foreign targets. So kind of like defeats the whole purpose of having domestic surveillance in the first place. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and
100%, man. And
yeah, and
yeah,
all these cyber incidents that happen, and you read about them in the news when they finally release the details about how this happened. It's always something very very basic that could have been easily prevented if basic protocols were followed. Like the Colonial Pipeline hack, I think happened because of two reasons. One of them was that their corporate network was not isolated from their operation network, so you could hack into an assistant manager at HR and technically get access to the operation of the pipelines. And the second one was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was that they had no second factor authentication set up, and they only relied on a single password. And I think some law enforcement official came out and said, "Well, it was a very strong password, but there was no 2FA." Yeah, and cybersecurity experts criticized, like, why didn't you set up a second factor? Why didn't you isolate your networks? And yeah, it's like
sure, it was a strong password.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like like using like Windows XP and all these old systems, and nothing ever happens. It's like, man, I don't know. Like we've had plenty of incidents, like you also mentioned, like the one in Ireland that actually didn't know about that one. I thought that the WannaCry that happened in 2017, I thought that was a pretty big one, but like nothing happened. Like no one even mentioned that, and it was like hundreds of thousands of computers that got encrypted. And now something like that can happen again. And I don't know, like in Mr. Robot, that was a series that I think ended a couple of years ago now. They had a scenario where like this foreign group would attack the United States, and they called the event cyber bombing. So they attacked buildings through like cyber attacks, and they caused explosions, and thousands of people died. So do you think this scenario could happen?
Uh, it depends on how things are set up, but maybe not on a mass scale in terms of every building, but like if you're talking about maybe not. It depends on how everything's set up, of course. What's connected to networks, what's on networks. Anything, anything can be attacked, and that's I loved that show, Mr. Robot, and super realistic as well. Like the whole all the hacks that happen in it for the most part are all real hacks that can be done.
Yeah.
They had professionals working on the show. Who made these attacks look really, really realistic, or have them shown in such a way that if they were to happen in the real life, this is how it would happen. Um, it's when you have such critical infrastructure, whether it be waterworks, whether it be nuclear power plants, whether it be um, electrical grids, all connected to a network, whether that network be air gapped or not. It does not matter. Sure, okay, it's not connected to the internet, but all it takes is somebody walking along and dropping a USB stick on the ground, and some curious chap walking along and thinking, oh, that might be a good 128 gig stick there. I may take that home, and I may plug that in, and then they go in and they plug it into their work computer, and it's gone. I think how they done it in Stuxnet. Don't quote me on it, but if I remember it correctly, it was literally made to spread as fast as possible to everybody's computers and sit dormant if it wasn't a person who was known to work in this facility. And then once it infected that person's computer, then it just waited until they got in. And once they went in and they got inside the facility and plugged that in to their work computer inside the air gap system, it was game over. So regardless of whether these systems are air gapped or not, and obviously I'm not sure the extreme details of the colonial pipeline, but it doesn't sound like that was even air gapped, you know. But even if they are air gapped, they're still vulnerable, and a lot of damage can be done with them. People's lives can be lost. It's just factual information, regardless of whether you think, uh, how likely you think it is to happen. That's the argument we can have here, and that's the argument security experts can have here, is how likely this is to happen. It's not a question of if it can happen. It can happen 100%. The question is how likely it is to happen and what time scale we're looking at. Um, yeah,
I mean, I think that in my book, a very like a totally catastrophic scenario would not have to kill anyone. It would have to just completely destroy the trust in the system, like something you had in Ireland. But I have no idea why people even trust their social security numbers there anymore. But like, I don't know. I would have tried to at least reset them to everyone. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but
yeah,
if you could do that, like if you could do that on like the scale in the United States with the social security numbers, or anywhere like with like all the government IDs, driving licenses, passports, and you can just dump them, and then you cannot really verify anyone anymore because anyone could be just lying. Anyone's identity could be stolen. Like
yeah,
this is a singularity point. Like who knows what could happen? You would completely like reset the system like overnight. And I can't even imagine what would happen from this. But I think this is actually pretty likely. This is something that could happen. Like someone could actually dump all of our most trusted government documents, and then we wouldn't be able to get loans, to get mortgages, to get like even buy a phone. If and
yeah.
something like that, like anything really, like pay rent, prove your identity, prove your address, like everything would be gone because anyone could abuse it.
Yeah, and just on a tangential point to that, like on how seriously people are taking it, not even necessarily the security side, but even on the privacy side, this is why privacy is so important. It's fundamental as a right, obviously, but even not on that point, it's fundamental to your security as well. Um, if you're what happens, this is a result of people at high levels not taking their citizens' privacy seriously. You have a right for your privacy to be upheld, so that's your private, personally identifiable information, to have that secured in a secure way, in an unreadable way, such that even if a data breach was to happen, the data that they steal is garbage data. It's not readable, and this is where it falls back to. And God, another example of that, like this is where this world kind of breaks apart. And I know I spoke to you a bit before, like even in the security community, they're not really taking this stuff seriously. They're they're not really knowledgeable on it, to be honest. Sure, we have a technical understanding of things, but in terms of law and ethics, uh, we don't really take this stuff that seriously. And because privacy isn't taken that seriously anywhere by anyone in any job or anywhere, especially your digital privacy, because of that, it results in these security instances. If everybody took their digital privacy more seriously, as serious as they take their home security, we'll say. Uh, if they treated, I think I heard you say it before, like if they treated their a data breach online of an account that they had as seriously as they would take a a a break in their house, then there would be a lot less incidences, because the public's mindset around this would be one of more priority on privacy, which would mean by default more priority on securing people's private data. And for an example, uh, in I hear this big case in the European Union was was about this dude named Graham Dwyer, and it was huge. Got pretty big global news coverage, at least in Europe anyway. Uh, he was a he was a convicted murderer. He now again, it's all still going through the system to this day. Um, but the dude killed a girl, murdered her straight out, and it brought up this massive debate that's still going on till this day. And what's it? This happened, God knows how many years ago now. Jesus, I think it was in like 2015, 2014, 2015, or no, even longer. Hold on, if I just one second. Yeah, okay. So we're looking at 2012, even longer. Okay, this sort of stuff happened. So this is how long this debate has been going on for. This dude murdered this girl, and the police only convicted him because his because of metadata that they got from his phone information.
Oh,
The only evidence that they had, now they had more evidence, sure, but the real key to the nail in the coffin, the strongest, the only evidence that they convicted him on, basically without this evidence, he would have gotten off because there would have been reasonable doubt. Because of that, he's he because of that data, it was illegally maintained, right? So again, if I look at it, Europeans top court confirmed this morning that, yeah, okay, again, Ireland's system of retaining and accessing mobile phone metadata breaches EU law. So the way that their system is set up is one where their companies here, these cell phone companies, are required by law to store everything about your call, who you called, how long you were talking with them for, who you were talking to, where you were physically, like your geolocation, when you were talking to them, etc., and more. Same with them. And all this data is required to be held for something like, I think it's 3 years minimum. And so all of these companies are holding all of this such extreme data on you for years on end, and they hold that for years. And this is where the debate comes up on is with this case was it's basically very common that it's commonly accepted that he did it. He murdered her. They convicted him as murdering her. He's a convicted murderer. However, because his conviction laid on this illegally obtained uh, data, he appealed under GDPR and other privacy legislation in the union, and got it up to the Supreme Court, who sent it up to the European Union's court, the Court of Justice, the ECJ or J, and they ruled like that the system of retaining and accessing mobile data by the police force was it just breached EU privacy law, because the way that their system works, they basically they take the data and then ask questions later, or they take the data and they come up with a legal justification for it later,
yeah.
and if it happened in this case, it happens in many cases, and it's very common. Your data, whether you be actually like the wanted party in this criminal investigation, or whether you be any literally anybody, you could be anybody, and your exact location, who you were talking to, when you were talking to them, and other metadata could be accessed at any point by regular police officers. And this was the argument, and going through with other security experts, like, because I'm talking to university professors about this, and I'm going prepared every day to have arguments with these people because they don't think it's serious. They think, ah, they should just let this go and convict them. And yeah, sure, okay, he most definitely murdered this girl. And it's a very, but I think we need, this is the point that I'm trying to get past. And he's teaching this to the next generation of security people who come through. And I'm trying to come to this with an unbiased thing, or trying to morph his opinion, or I was years ago, and say, I pulled him up on it immediately, and I say, listen, man, you need to cover this from a more neutral position. You're covering this from the point of view of this is terrible. He did it. He should not have the right to have that privacy. Okay? Which is fine. My point is that's a horrible assumption here. So you're assuming that absolutely no person in the country should have privacy because one guy killed a girl, And this is an emotional topic because a person got murdered, and it's very terrible, and God rest her soul. But I don't think that it's a fair trade-off to say that a police force should be allowed access literally anybody's private data at whim because they think that you might have committed a crime. Or on the other hand, maybe there's been lots of cases coming out recently of Facebook or Meta employees accessing people's private data to stalk people. So, these could be officers accessing your exact location that's stored because they want to stalk you. Um, I think, for example, I seen on the BBC recently, a few weeks ago, there's so many thousand police officers um, that have been were reported as being domestic abusers for their wives at home, and it was just brushed under the table. They were allowed to resign and take their paychecks with them.
Oh
They
God.
weren't convicted. There was no information come back at them. But what if those people had access? What if their wives ran away? They're relying on the privacy that they have to keep themselves safe, and you're potentially giving abusers this access to hunt them down with advanced technology, to violate their rights, to find their exact location at any given time, who they call, who they talk to, see their exact phone records. These are the implications, and I don't think that just because it's this one sensitive issue, and I think that was the case with 9/11 and the Patriot Act too, you're taking this extremely sensitive issue and you're using that to give yourself more power and enrich yourself, and this is the problem. In general, your privacy, your security, it's one. They are two separate issues, but it's so dependent on one another. They need to be taken more seriously from everybody, and I think because it's such a new paradigm, the general public doesn't really take it seriously, especially um, especially the older crowd of people. Maybe the younger crowd now growing up are taking it a bit more seriously because of the fact that probably everybody now at this stage knows somebody who got hacked or knows somebody who had a data breach incident, and so they're growing up and they're more familiar with it. And but besides that, like, it's not being taken seriously by anybody, and it needs to be taken more seriously.
Yeah, this is what made me actually rethink my teaching strategy because I mostly thought and focused on the fact that if I point out these vulnerabilities in the systems and how our data is being collected by all kinds of third parties, then people would take that seriously on its own. But apparently they don't, and a lot of people don't. Many still, think that this is a problem, but I think they are in a minority, and most people are just, well, I don't see any harm in this, so I'm not gonna be bothered. So recently, I've actually, I haven't done too much work on this, but I think this would be the best way to change the strategy in the hopes of persuading as many people as possible, and that is not to teach about vulnerabilities, but to teach about abuse. and explain
Yeah.
people how in specific cases and even in many real world cases all these privacy invasions can completely like destroy your life. They can, give power to a domestic abuser. They can, empower government abuse, government overreach, and, show some real critical examples of how this can happen. Fraud, scam, some sort of harassment, cyber crime of all kinds. I think this is the best way, like to show this, like with these police officers, abusing their power. And in the United States, there was actually a case where a dude in a town was charged, arrested, and was the lead suspect in a murder as well, on the basis of phone metadata again. But the phone metadata was collected from, I think it was their Google account or Apple account. I'm not sure which one it was. And this was on the ground that the location data from that account matched with the scene, with the crime scene. So they got a guy, they caught him, and they thrown his mugshot into the newspapers. And now when you search his name, the first thing that's gonna pop up in Google search is gonna be that he's a suspect in a murder case. However, on that Google account were two people, and it was that other person that committed the murder, not him. So he was let go. However, he lost his job. He lost his car because he lost his job. He had to sell his car. He lost his home because he got divorced. So his life was completely destroyed, and he sued the city for $1.5 million. But at that point, like, no amount of money is gonna give your life back. Like, you lost your wife, you lost your job, you lost everything. Everyone thinks that you are a bad person because of a wrong call. So this
And
is another scenario. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and like, and there's no chance of you getting it back either.
Yeah.
Once your name's destroyed, that's it.
Yeah, there is a good resource on privacy. He's called Michael Basil or Bazel. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It's probably not even his real name, but he's doing a service. Well, he has a podcast, and he also wrote books on open source intelligence and privacy, and he also doing this as a service. So you can hire him in the United States to help you disappear, and he does this with like he has a firm, and he will establish an anonymous LLC, which you can do in America with various states, and he will help you completely disappear, even like from the eyes of like the general public and even from the banks. Like he will make sure that not even your car is registered to your address, or your home is not. You cannot find their address, their home address, because it's under an anonymous LLC or an anonymous trust. Yeah, but the
Jesus.
stories that he's telling, like, that's crazy. Like, people running away, like, he's helping a lot of rich people, but in many cases these people are victims of domestic abuse, and their abusers would, they would give them a phone, and that phone would have some sort of malware, spyware installed on it. So they would know their location, they would know their messages and stuff like that. It would give them a laptop or something like that. It would try, like, not necessarily highly skilled or technical abusers, but, still capable of monitoring their victims. And they would have to go into extreme lengths to protect their privacy, really hide themselves, even like going these extra like legal steps, establishing or entities to essentially disappear. And what's frustrating about this is that even after take all of these extreme steps just to be safe, because they need this privacy for their own safety, because their lives are at risk, now they cannot really go back to living the normal life, because their friends and family are not at the same level. They are living normal lives. They are not. Their addresses are not at the anonymous LLCs. So they could reveal their information. They could be now their operation security threat. And it's like, once something like this happens to you, there is no turning back. And it's like, I don't want to be this, like living in a paranoid vision of the world, but like it can happen so easily that someone will get hold on your stuff and they will abuse it and they will completely destroy your life, or they will just make it a living hell for months or years to come. And it happens more and more often. So I hope that this would change people's minds if just talking about vulnerabilities wouldn't.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially from a like a general public's perspective, like not everybody has the time to be going and becoming experts on these subjects. That's why we have specialists and things, and that's how we've advanced so quickly as a society, is by specialization into certain topics. So it needs to be done, and it needs to be made easily. And we're emotional creatures, and yeah, the best way to convince people, I think, rather than giving them facts and figures, is just saying, giving them a nice emotional story and say, what do you think they do? The other side uses 9/11 and uses these murders and uses these horrible, abhorrent situations, and uses that emotional response that it generates in people to pass legislation that's intrusive or gain extra powers that they don't need and never give them back. We need to use that, I think, that same tool, that same tactic, um, to fight back in terms of, let's pull up these stories. Let's show how people's lives are being ruined in the real world, and how your life can be ruined too because of this issue. I think the only reason privacy legislation is getting passed in the European Union and in the United States at all is because more and more people are having incidents happen to them. They're having that. Everybody now knows somebody who something happened to, if it hasn't happened to them themselves. And I think that's the only reason why it's happening, is because it's instilling that, it's pulling up that emotional response from people, you know. And I was listening to your last video with Closed Network, and he made a great point, like, about making this sort of stuff mainstream and making apps. I've never listened to him apart from your videos, but what's it making this sort of stuff mainstream, and making it very simple to use, right? So like the likes of, I'm not sure whether you've seen that. Oh, you have. I think I think I seen, so you mentioned it before, that Netflix thing that came out ages ago, The Social Dilemma or
Mm-hmm.
something it was called,
Yes.
and how they mentioned, like, these people are going to MIT and studying how to psychologically manipulate the masses into using these applications, and how to trick them into using it and make them addicted to using them more and more. And this is the problem. How do you fight that? The only way to fight it is by making these tools and making the switch to a more secure, more privacy conscious lifestyle, to make that switch as easy as possible. And um, for I seen a few days ago. Now apparently it's been going through the ringer for a while now, but I seen a few days ago, again, because the European Union is by far the most uh, restrictive on big tech and that sort of thing. Um, they had they have this new legislation. It's called the Digital Markets Act, and I think there's a sister legislation called the Digital Services Act. It hasn't been passed yet. They accepted a proposal for it, and if this proposal is to pass, then some really beneficial things that can happen from this. One clause, if I just pull it up here, that I thought I'd mention, says, during a close to 8 hour long trilogue between Parliament, Council, and Commission, EU lawmakers agreed that the largest messaging services such as WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and iMessage on the iPhone will have will have to open up and interoperate with smaller messaging platforms if they so request. Users of smaller big platforms would then be able to exchange messages, send files, and make video calls across messaging apps, thus giving them more choice. This is the sort of thing that I love to hear, right? So, of course, it's going to be the same as Proton Mail, email, and a Gmail account. It's not going to have that sort of secure level once it hits Google servers. However, it'll make, for the masses, it'll make the switch to something like Signal so much easier, because what's the biggest power that these companies have, like say WhatsApp for Facebook, is they have an enclosed circle that nobody can escape out of. You cannot get outside. You can't just delete WhatsApp, because your entire family and all your friends use WhatsApp, or they use iMessage, or they use Facebook Messenger, or they use Snapchat, or whatever it is. That's why they're all locked in, and that's why they can't leave. It's because they've locked them. They've used their powerful position to isolate people into this group where they can't escape, and that's why, if anybody is in the European Union watching this, go talk to your representatives and ensure it's currently in the stages now in Parliament. It's going for approval from the Commission and from Parliament, who will get the choice to veto it or not, or it'll pass. And go talk to your uh, MEPs, members of European Parliament, and tell them you will not vote for them and they will not get elected. You will make it your mission to ensure they are not re-elected if they do not vote in favor of this legislation passing. There is zero negatives to this legislation, except Apple and Facebook and Google trying to push back and say, oh, it's going to be so insecure. How are we going? It's going to be so expensive. We'll have to close down, blah, blah, blah. Facebook already threatened to close down. They were told to do it and they wouldn't do it. There's too much money here to be made. They're not going to follow through on any of these threats. And even if they did, that would be amazing. How dare you as a company feel that you're so powerful you can threaten countries? What? If we're at a stage now where private companies can threaten countries, they need to be regulated and they need to be reined in. We cannot be letting that happen. We're going to get to a stage, what next, where Facebook's military, their private security force, will be on par with America's? Is that the world we want to get on? Because that's the road we're heading down if we let this sort of behavior go unchecked. Um, this is it. If we get this legislation to pass, and this passes, there will be ripple effects, like with the GDPR inspiring what's a CCPA? I'm not sure, the
In
California Consumer
California, yeah,
Protection
yeah,
Act,
yeah.
um, and similar ones in New York and beyond that are going through, and in other continents also. And this act will be inspire similar regulations in the United States and across the world then. And what will happen is Facebook Messenger, iMessage, WhatsApp, they will be forced to be interoperable with Signal. What that means, from your Signal app or from your whatever app, you will be able to send messages to your family on other apps. And that'll make the switch so much easier, because you can ditch it all. And sure, your messages to those specific people won't be as secure as messaging other people using secure messaging apps, but it makes the switch for you easier. And then, if the switch is for you, then you can show your friends or your family, like, yeah, oh, I'm only using this, and look how easy it is. It's literally the same app, but it's blue instead of green.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying. It makes the switch easier. Although, as you said, it's not between Google and Proton Mail. It's not secure. But for the general public, they don't have that much of a threat model. They don't care that much. So making the switch en masse, we need to make uh, this a mainstream thing. You know.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit conflicted on this legislation. I don't know too many details of it. It's not even a legislation yet. It's just a proposal, as you said. However, I would say that I am a big proponent of interoperability, but I'm not sure the way the EU is trying to mandate it is the way to go. My elegant solution would be just to open source all software, and if you
Yeah.
if you don't want to do that, at least open source all the APIs. But at that point, it doesn't really matter. Just open source all software. That in that way, we could have something like that. But like mandating this, I think that these companies are gonna try to fight this as much as possible because once you open up your APIs, it's not just for Europe. You do that essentially for the whole world. But I think what they would try to do is, for example, WhatsApp would, okay, we would be interoperable, but only in Europe. So maybe we would only accept like European numbers, and it wouldn't work with the US numbers or something like that. But they have to invest into actually filtering that, and I'm not really sure. I mean, it would be great to have something like that, but um, I don't know. I think I wonder what Signal would say about this because I'm not sure how you are familiar with this debate, but Signal had a debate with Matrix over this issue that Matrix is trying to build an interoperable end-to-end encrypted messaging platform, whereas Signal tried to go this Silicon Valley centralized route. And one of their arguments was like, if we want to have a secure app, we have to be in control of the protocol. Otherwise, if we just decentralize it, we are losing security properties. When we are making improvements, they're gonna, stay at the last point, and they're not gonna upgrade. We lose control over what kind of clients people are using. So, and in a sense, that's happening on Matrix. Like there's so many clients. Some of them are malicious bypassing the security of the protocol itself. So yeah, there is a point there, but what's your take on this? You already expressed your support for this legislation, so do you think that this would be a solution that that would actually bring about something that's overwhelmingly positive?
Maybe, maybe not, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have too much of a culture. I think in sort of our Euro American society of putting an overemphasis on private companies' rights as individuals to self-regulate. And I think time and time again, self-regulation has been proven to fail, and it's being proven to be ineffective. Not in all areas, but I think in certain areas, and this being one of them, cybersecurity being one of them, there needs to be at least a baseline on which um, people operate, and then from there they can work onwards. This will only apply to major influencing apps, right? So it's not going to affect Joe down the road who wrote his own messaging app. Like, it's not going to affect him. It's only these mega giants like WhatsApp, like Facebook Messenger, like iMessage that are going to be affected, and they'll need to be forced to do it. They will not, under any circumstances, um, open source these endpoints for smaller apps to compete because they don't want competition. They don't want it. They like a facade of competition, but in reality, like, oh yeah, you have all of this choice. There's a whole tree social media messaging apps you can use. What more could you ask for? Jesus, that's not competition. That's not an open free market for them to fight on. What we need, and I think given the only way to create that level playing field, and that's what I'm all about, is everybody having that level playing field, that opportunity to succeed. That's what I'm all about, and I think that the only way to create that is to mandate the fact that people can use whatever they want but they shouldn't be forced into doing it. You're not being given the free will of what messaging apps to use. Technically, you are, and they'll say, yeah, sure, you can choose to use Signal if you want, or you can choose to use Matrix if you want. But in reality, man, if every single person you know is using one social media app and you're on your own using the other one, it's not going to happen. That's not really a choice. That's talk to your that's holding your own social life at your own, like holding a knife to its neck and saying, "Here's your choice. Either we slice it or we don't." You know, that's not really a free choice to make. So overall, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think that regulation needs to be done. Again, I like the perspective of it only applying to companies that reach a certain size, because it's only to rein in the power of these mega corporations, and not for the sake of implementing it on everybody. Because I know myself, when GDPR came in, and this is greatest piece of legislation. I have zero qualms with it, except maybe that it doesn't go far enough. But
Yeah.
other than that, like everything that's there, I'm in support of, and it makes it much harder. It makes it a lot harder to develop applications because you need to worry about all this stuff, and that's great. 100% behind that. We should have been worrying about it from the beginning, from the get go. But when you move into this other world, if you start putting too many regulations down, then that's going to be a prohibiting factor for people to develop applications and develop new services. So the fact that it's only targeting organizations that reach a certain size is a pro factor in my opinion. And I wish 100% I would be on your side. I am not a pro big government, give them all the rights to do everything. Uh, I want as limited as we can possibly go, but at the same time, we they're in theory at least they're there to we're giving them the power to enact legislation that protects us. In theory, I'll put that asterisk, 10 asterisks there. um, but what's it? And I think this is one situation where they need to step in and put this in place, because as much as I'd like for us to be a fully open source world, that's not going to happen. I think that's unrealistic, because there's too many there's too many actors at play. There's too much big money being thrown around. Too many there's too much going on, and especially Apple will kill their own company before they'll open source their entire thing, their whole operation. um uh, so yeah, I think that this is one situation where regulation needs to be brought in. I'm not familiar with the Signal versus Matrix debate that they had going on there. Honestly, from in my opinion, I think we need to get a bunch of mathematicians and put them in a room and let them have the debate for us, and have them come out and explain it to them afterwards. Because as much as we like to talk about this stuff, cryptography is a field of mathematics, you know,
Hmm.
and the way that it was taught to me, at least, my understanding and my research into it was we it was a great one that one of my professors put to me originally. Was drew a triangle up on the board, right? And he put mathematicians up at the top of that triangle. He's like, these are the people who actually understand cryptography, because cryptography is a mathematical field. The rest of us have no clue, really. We have the dumbed down, watered down versions that they give to us. They give them to security architects who are mathematicians still also, and also know how to program, and they'll program these really, really in-depth, deep, low level libraries that will then be incorporated into language libraries, which will then be used by uh, organizations to create cryptographic libraries, which are then audited, and then you get down to the likes of you, me, Signal developers. Now I know that they're a bit higher up in the chain considering they developed their own protocol to do that, but their protocol implements cryptography in such a way that like there's still so much depth to it. That's the one thing with security in general. Nobody knows anything, and like we all have a little bit of knowledge, but no matter how much, you can dedicate your entire life to studying one niche topic, and there's always going to be somebody who you can have a conversation with and they'll make you feel like you have no clue what you're talking about. That's one of the great things about computer science. I feel there's just so much depth in every area you want to go, and I think for us to be having this conversation uh, on such an important topic, I think it needs to be left up to really, really, really specialized experts and have them come up with their theses, have them come up with their opinions, have other experts criticize it, and let them come up with uh, possible directions that we can all then make informed decisions to go down those routes. I don't think we have enough information on all these topics at the moment to be able to make those decisions. Although, of course, Signal as an organization is going to be in favor of centralized systems. Of course, Matrix or the people who are developing that system are going to be in favor of going the decentralized route. I think we need an objective, or as objective as you can get, third party, a real mathematical, scientific route where they go and criticize that and inform us. That we need. I think we need more data, more specific data on this topic. Arguments need to be go around in it. There needs to be the next Twitter mathematical battle,
Yeah.
releasing maths papers, criticizing maths papers, going back and forth, and then when they've all went and done, then they can explain it to us dumb people.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
definitely want to be a vector for these kinds of debates because I think it is also important to bring more public attention to this so that maybe more pressure and just more funding is provided to
yeah,
these kinds of folks. So I'm definitely not a mathematician or a cryptographer, so I'm gonna try to use whatever resources I have in my hands to make sure that as many people as possible can hear this message and be
yeah,
properly informed, and then you know hopefully more people would be exposed to what I think should be done and what I think should be. You laid it out perfectly here. I think that we should have like just more expertise in this, and just generally just more funding, more resources,
yeah,
programs, grants, everything we should completely ramp it up, and we should ideally we should do it before anything major happens. And I don't know, like it's a difficult topic. If it's a difficult task because it's like you are trying to convince people, but also you are fighting against this whole this whole side will tell you that no, we don't need that much security, we don't need that much privacy, because then we are enabling bad actors, then we are enabling murderers and criminals. So we need to be able to crack encryption, we need to be able to bypass it, and then we have the laws like in Australia where they can mandate employees and companies to bypass encryption per individual targets,
yeah,
and they cannot even talk about it. They cannot go to court because they'll go to jail immediately for like breaching the law. So yeah, this is an uphill battle.
yeah, 100%. It's going to be a fight, but look, I think if one thing If there's one thing that separates us, I think, as nations, as our nations are, um, you know, a lot of people will argue with you and say, ah, there's so much corruption, there's so much, they're bought and paid for. We are, at the end of the day, technically a democracy, you know, they, and when we compare ourselves to other regimes that are actually extremely undemocratic, think, whether it be oligarchies, with theocracies, other authoritarian regimes across the globe, um, we have a lot of power as citizens to go and fight this. And we have a lot more power than I think people realize. And it's being beaten into us from kids and beyond, like how, oh no, you don't have the power, just submit, there's too much money behind it. But at the end of the day, your politician can't take bribes if he's not voted into power, you know? So at the end of the day, he's going to do whatever it takes to get into power. From that point, he can take bribes then. So you do have power as a citizen, and that's how we'll fight this. It's about convincing people that they have individually, they do have a power to make changes. And it's as you said, it's a horribly uphill battle because people are so used to nowadays just being told this is how it's going to be, and their government or their prime minister or their president telling them this is what the new law is, period, this is how it's going to be. And that's the way it is. That's what happened in Australia. It was slid in under the door, in about 10 minutes, and no meetings, there was no debates, there was no nothing that goes in with it. What should have happened there is there should have been a crazy amount of protests, a crazy amount of outcry, saying, hold on a minute, why the hell was this snuck under the back door? You better revert this and at least have a debate, a public debate. You serve us, we have to follow these laws, but at the end of the day, we employ you. We pay your wages. It's our tax money that pays your wages. We put you in power. We vote for you. If you do not revert this, if you do not fix this issue, then it's game over for you, buddy. No more. You're out of the limelight. Goodbye. And it, as you said, uphill battle all the way. It's always been. Look at what's his name, that repair guy on YouTube, Louis Rossman or something, and his fight for the repair movement and
Yeah.
the right to repair, and what's in America, and it's years. That chap has been going on about this for the better part of a decade, and but he got there in the end. Like, obviously it's not perfect yet, but it's slow. It's slow and it's incremental, and you get there. And it's hard because there's such big money and such powerful organizations fighting you, but that's the way it's always been throughout history, man. If you go back hundreds of years, like, it's always been the same. There's always been that class of powerful people or organizations that want to enact their will in an undemocratic way, and over time, thankfully, over time, it always gets better. And I think that's what people need to realize. It might not get, it might only get a tiny bit better in our lifetime, even. But maybe not. It could get a lot better in our lifetime. Hopefully, it will. Fingers crossed. But you need to think about this from the point of view of, okay, in 20 in 21 22, is it, are kids going to grow up and be able to read in the history books how there was this big movement that fought for your rights, and now that you have these rights to privacy, you have these rights for security? Or are they going to look back and say, this was the time where everything went downhill and it went to shit hit the fan, and now you have even less rights than you had to begin with?
Yeah, it's one of the aspects that makes this whole thing even more complicated is the fact that there doesn't seem to be like one single or a simple solution that you could point to and say, well, this is what we should definitely all do universally, and it would make things better, and we should just go on this path. At least I don't see one. Like, um, for a long time I thought that a desktop operating system is just more secure than a mobile operating system, and for the only reason for that was because on these mobile applications you would have all these tracking APK tracking SDKs, and they would just track every single data point that they can get their hands on, like your location and contacts and social graph and all that stuff. And on desktop you could sort of like limit that, especially if you went for something like Linux, so that you're not bound to any sort of corporation and you stay away from all the corporate software as much as possible. But then when I went deeper into this, I realized that desktop is not really that secure at all, and that's true for Linux uh, quite a lot, because there's very little sandboxing, very little firewall work being done. Whereas even on Android, like on stock Android, you have like significant measures against like heavy, expensive attacks that try to escape sandbox. That try to You would have like significant protections even against like exploit chains, and really like um, you know the only game that's left on the mobile operating system for the most part, when we are talking about like the modern Android, like up to date latest Android, not like Android 6. Some phones apparently run that. But like modern Android, like it's going to be significantly harder for someone to hack you or even exfiltrate any sort of data. You can be very careful with how you use your device. And I wondered what your take on this is. Do you think that the mobile security is doing it right as opposed to desktop security, or what would your ideal approach to this be? Because mobile security has a problem of like immense data collection, and that's mostly how the apps are designed, especially like social media apps, but even like news apps and weather apps and games, they collect just too much data. However, at least you have some permissions that you can toggle and you can limit that. But on desktop, you don't have that at all. So, what's your take?
Yeah, as I said, I'm not yet an expert on or on anything really. I wouldn't consider anybody to be an expert on anything, but I'm not as in depth in mobile security per se, but from my own perspective and for what I do understand, I definitely think the mobile environment is more secure. Um, 100%, as you said, for all the reasons you spoke about now, and for all the reasons I've heard you speak about in the future, or in the past rather. Um, yeah, it's such a tough area because they're made for two different environments. They're made to do two different things. Sure, they're both computers, but they're fit for different purposes, right? Um, Linux, the Linux kernel, Android is based off of a modification of the Linux kernel. Um, Obviously, there's a heck of a ton of additions added on top of that. Um, but in theory, you could modify a Linux distro to be exactly the same and have those. I'm not aware of any distributions that implement the same level of isolation. Maybe what's a Unix or something like that, maybe, but definitely not with the same efficiency that Android does it with. It's actually unbelievable. Like, I try to run a few of those distributions. It's not doable on laptops anyway. Even
Yeah,
if you get an expensive ass laptop, you're talking about half an hour battery life, 64 gigs of RAM to run anything, because you need to run everything in its own computer nearly.
yeah,
I actually I don't understand how it does it so well. I want to understand how it does it so well from a technical perspective. Maybe that's something some astute engineers, some incredibly talented people could work on in the future, is some sort of distribution that implements isolation the way Android does. 100%. I love the way you can limit permissions, and even from a development perspective, obviously you've developed a lot of Android applications to do things. Personally, apps that I do use a lot and I use frequently, I like to try and make my own versions of them solely because I know then what's happening. With the thing with Android is most of the applications are Java based, and if they're run with Java, the APKs are Java libraries, right? And they can be reverse engineered back to nearly the original Java code. So it's much different reverse engineering those to say a a binary compiled via like Rust or C++ or something. But even then, you don't want to have to reverse engineer an app to go through God knows how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of code lines to figure out what's happening or if any data is going out. So I like to, uh, for example, I'm trying to focus a lot more on my health, and there's the big app, what's a MyFitnessPal, and I have no idea what sort of crap that thing wants to exfiltrate out of my phone. So I look at that, I look at the designs, and I try and build my own solution that does the same things, but it's much more lightweight. And I like it's not from a user friendly perspective. I don't compromise on that. I tend to even steal their UI half the time so that it looks good as well. Because because let's be honest, bro, you want your apps to look cool. You want them to feel good to use. You don't want everything to be 90s style websites back there, and it doesn't need to be the same way in as I said before. I like developing websites with little to no JavaScript whatsoever because I don't think JavaScript is necessary under in 90% of applications on the web. Like, I think so much can be accomplished with CSS animations, and obviously there's threat vectors there as well, but eliminating JavaScript would reduce it a lot. And it's the same thing on the mobile side. You want you don't need to compromise the look and feel of the application for the security, and that I think that's a big turn off for people as well. I think because most people are like myself or like other people, a lot of us developers may not be we work off a command line half the time, so we're not the best. We're not web designers, we're not designers. So that we may not make the nicest looking things, but they're functional, and that's the way we work. But the vast majority of people aren't. So I think that's a huge turn off for people when they have to use tools, and the tools have to be used on a command line, or if they do have an app, the app's ugly as hell. So I think it's a really important factor is making the applications that are secure look gorgeous, make them extremely intuitive and easy to use, and yeah, and so that's kind of my approach to it. It's hard, but I love the Android project in general. I think it's much more beneficial, even with its downsides. From Google, I suppose it's got its there's so much more upside and positive to it. And you have those forks of it. You have Lineage, you have Graphene, and they take out the Google side of it, which works really well. Um, Again, you know, I I seen a couple of research papers looking at on how much data that they actually take out on default, and if you look at Lineage OS, and if you look at some other ones that are pretty famous, um, uh, they actually still do exfiltrate some or rather send back some what advertising IDs and persistent advertising IDs back to Google servers, which was a surprise for me. And this was a research paper that came out of Trinity College in Dublin. However, these are all defaults, right? And you can turn it off. The same researchers done tests with Firefox as well, and shown that by default, Firefox sends a hell of a lot of telemetry back, and that's what they were trying to peg it against Brave, the Brave browser, and how that doesn't send it all back. But these are all defaults, and you can configure it to do that. But I think it's important for a mass from a mass user perspective. And I'm kind of swaying off topic a bit, but the essentials of what I'm trying to say is like we can go in depth as we want here, but I try to think of things from a your average user perspective, who because your average Joe isn't not going to go into his settings and try and configure his privacy settings. It's just not going to happen. Your average Joe is not going to be able to program his own applications to run on Android. Your average Joe is not going to be able will not use an application if it doesn't look and feel good. And I think these are important ones to hit. Um, I love Android, as I said, the Android project. How it compares to Linux, it's based on it. I love the isolation that it does, as you pointed out, without repeating myself 20 times.
No, not at all. I mean, this is very educational, and I think that people will definitely love listening to an expert with like multi year experience and hearing all these stories that you're telling. Like that's like amazing, and I could like question you for hours because this is definitely something that I think is lacking in the public eye, and the more we talk, I think the more we inspire others to sort of get on this path and spread the good message because like you are a hacker but also I sense a little bit of an activist in you like with that message to call your MEPs and do something and be politically active in a democracy, and that's all true. That's all things that we can do, and it's also part of this broader security and privacy strategy. Like we need to have public awareness, and we need to have everyone involved in this. It's not just that a few experts can do their job and do pen testing and writing code and securing networks. It's everyone has to be involved, and that's also like in like you mentioned that at the beginning of this talk somewhere that you could have a technically perfect secure system, but the people in that system are going to be its vulnerabilities, and that is true. That's true in like in the most global sense. Like in a country, like if you have people who are unaware of these problems, they cannot even conceptualize what the issues are, what the vulnerabilities are, what the abuse is. And this is what Snowden also did. Like Snowden leaked those documents not because he thought that the program should be shut down, and he should do that or something like that. He wanted the public to know and to make an informed consent because he believed that people are not making an informed consent. And I think that if people like you are coming out and they are sharing their stories, like I've read about this. I've read about security researchers being frustrated, working on teams on security issues and not being listened to. And now when you come here and when you say this, it's a lot more personal. It means a lot more to me now because it's not just me reading it in a newspaper article. It's hearing it from someone, and I hear the frustration that you have, and also the hope. I think you're pretty hopeful about some of the things. Like you're hopeful about how we can change this going forward and make things better. So you're kind of both.
Yeah, definitely. And look, to anybody who may think that Snowden is a traitor or anything. Go read his book, man. Have you read Permanent Record? Oh my God. The chap couldn't be more pro America. Like, he couldn't be more patriotic for his country. And as you said, it wasn't about his decision for wanting to do it for himself. He wanted to just have people consent to it. And the consent is what I'm all about too. And I had a conversation actually with somebody, um, another tech nerd there a few weeks ago, and I was talking about the privacy concerns, and I was telling them all this about Google and stuff, and we were having that conversation and that debate, and he was saying, look, I recognize that, and you know, I still want to use it anyway. And I was saying, well, sure, that's perfectly okay. Like, if you recognize that they're harvesting all of this data, and you, as a technical person, recognize all of this and still want to use this service, go for it, hand. But that's the difference. This is what I'm saying. I'm not trying to stop people from using these services. I just want to make sure that people are really understand what they are, consenting to. If the consent isn't informed, it's not really consent. You know, um, we don't like if somebody's piss drunk, blackout drunk, that's not considered consent. If somebody is, if so why is it considered consent if the person has no clue whatsoever under any stretch of the imagination what the hell they're consenting to? They have no clue. Your average person isn't going to sit down and read a 1500 like page privacy policy that's all legalese and then understand it afterwards to be able to comprehend it all and then do that 20 times for every single app that they have on their phone. It's not informed at all under any stretch of the imagination, and that's the problem here. And that's all I'm trying to convince people of is um, make sure, because I think that for the most part, if everybody really understood all of this, really understood what they were consenting to, 99% of people would probably opt out of it. It's the same thing with, I know it's not the best the best example, but with the Apple thing pushing the update and saying, all right, and it says it in simple words, this app wants to track you. Do you want to let it? Yes, no. And such a high percentage of people pick no, and Facebook or Meta or whatever the hell you want to call it, they fought to the ground, pushing advertising down people's throats, saying this is a horrible thing. This is terrible for you. What? Excuse me. And what's it? That's all because they know quite well if it's put to people in simple terms, then most people are going to opt out of it. The vast majority of people, and that's why they have their army of lawyers coming out. That's why they invest so many billions of dollars. We can't even comprehend the amount of money that they invest into fighting these legal cases. Also, that people are not informed correctly. They want people to feel informed, so they'll make nice little flashy things. They make little videos that talk about privacy. They'll pay what's it, news organizations to write articles criticizing other apps, and also that people feel informed. But that feeling informed is not actually being informed on the topic,
Hmm.
and that's the problem. And that's the toughie. That's the brain twister. How do we solve that problem?
Yeah. On the other hand, I'm also optimistic about a few things. Not too many, but even companies like Google, they are investing pretty heavily into more security and even privacy, because I kind of like separate these concepts. Like you can have a secure system, but not be private, and vice versa. But like there are like three major developments in algorithms when it comes to AI and encryption. So one of them is differential privacy, which both Apple and Google are doing. And believe it or not, but Google's implementation seems to be way better than Apple's. So I don't know, for those who don't know, differential privacy is basically like mathematically proving that you cannot re-identify an anonymized data set, and you have epsilon values, and the higher the value, the easier it is to re-identify individuals. And Apple doesn't even publish their epsilon values, which kind of like defeats the whole purpose. But Google does, and it's open sourced, which is the point. Apple's isn't, and Google's epsilon is 2, which is, it's not good. It should be below 1, but 2 is, well, it's not okay, but compared to Apple's, there was an independent study and they had like 9 for macOS and 14 for iOS, which is like, it's not like they're not even trying. It's literally so that they can just put it on the marketing material somewhere on their website. But it's like when even Google is trying to take some steps to make sure that at least when it comes to like their Gboard or music suggestions and stuff like that, that can happen in a more anonymized way. Or federated learning, that's the one when I'm talking about, like with Gboard, like they are trying to make computations on device so that they don't actually have to collect the data points. They only collect the updated learning model. And there's also another one. This one was actually developed by Microsoft. It's called homomorphic encryption. And Microsoft just developed it, but they never implemented it. But I think Google is trying to do this again, but it's not being implemented anywhere as of right now, as far as I know. The point of homomorphic encryption is to be able to end-to-end encrypt user data and still make algorithmic computations on the data without requesting the key and decrypting it. So it would make it so that you don't actually see the data. You could still make the computations on it, make recommendations, suggestions, whatever you need, but you would not actually see the data. And again, all of this would be mathematically proven. So these are things that kind of give me hope that maybe there could be an incentive for some of these companies to go the opposite way, to go the right direction for a change, and maybe limit the amount of data that they're collecting and improve some of their security. Like I sometimes ask this question, like when was the last time you heard Google have a data breach? Right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, it happened in, actually, there was one, and it happened not so long ago. It was in 2018, and it was over this hugely popular and incredibly successful service called Google Plus, which Google eventually shut down, and only 500,000 people's data were leaked. But I'm not sure how consequential that was. I'm saying only because now we are talking about like millions and millions or hundreds of millions of users' data that are being leaked on a single database, especially when it comes to Facebook. But yeah, Google, you know, as much shit as they get, and they deserve to get that shit because they are collecting too much data, especially when it comes to search and stuff like that. You know, paradoxically, they've made some changes recently in recent years, since 2016 onwards, and maybe it's a trend. Maybe it's just they did this once and they're never gonna do it again. I don't know. I don't want to fanboy over Google because I'm not. I'm critical of Google and there's too many problems with the company. But maybe change is possible. Maybe we are gonna have a more secure model.
Shit, man, am I gonna hear a video like, oh, why you should choose Google in 2 years' time or something? um, what's it? I, yeah, no, I'm kind of familiar with homomorphic encryption and differential privacy. Yeah, definitely, man. Look, listen, this is what I'm talking about, especially homomorphic encryption. If anybody wants to look that up and read on it, I'm not even going to try and explain it here. Definitely can't do a better job than how you explained it. It was perfect. But it's incredible the things that are possible and the way to do it privately and securely simultaneously. And all it needs is the money behind it. There's so much innovation waiting to happen in this field if the right minds are put on it. As we said, especially at Google, and I've said it before, like Google has some of the smartest people in the world, some of the best engineers in the world. And if they're pointed in the right direction, if they're allowed, rather, if they're allowed to work on these projects, they can create some incredible stuff. And yeah, look, we can criticize them all we want, and we will criticize them when they do bad. But when good things do happen, it's important to give them that credit for that credit where credit is due. Because if we just keep hitting them with it, then they won't have any incentive to keep going. I think they'll if you keep giving them credit and rewarding them when they make good decisions like that, well then they'll be more inclined to make more of those decisions down the road in the future, right? Because at the end of the day, they're a private company. They have that profit incentive. They couldn't give less of a shit whether they're harvesting data or whether they're not harvesting data. Once they're making their money, that's it. So if they can make their money and make their money in a way that still is privacy preserving, then they'll 100% do that. They would love nothing more than to be able to do that, because that would mean that they can make all their money, but at the same time, they can advertise how awesome they are with privacy, the way Apple tries to. And then they give away somebody's data off their iPhone. But what's it? Um, yeah, like and so yeah, like there's lots of I'm sure there's so many more cool ways that were invented slash discovered in the 80s and 90s before computers were even widespread or a thing, that just haven't had are sitting in some library somewhere waiting to be discovered again. And then of course more to come after that. Yeah, like differential privacy is amazing. It's this cool this cool cool system whereby it works best on large data sets, and it allows, like, companies need, fair enough, okay, we'll give them it. They want to make informed decisions for the benefit of their own company, right? And if you or I run a company, you're the exact same, right? You were talking about your analytics on YouTube. You need to use those analytics to decide what's the best for people, and what direction you want to go on in the future. But differential privacy, as simple of an explanation as we can put it here, is a method whereby we can collect this data in an anonymized way, and it's anonymized in the way that um, either your device is sending back the correct data or it's sending back garbage data. And it could be garbage data or it could be correct data. So you don't know. So you don't actually, on an individual level, they don't know. You're not being disclosed. Your decisions and your data is not being specifically disclosed. But on a much larger scale, they can account for that, and they use very, very. I'm not even going to get into it. They use very, very complex algorithms, and they can account for that, and so that the data is still useful for them on a large scale to make decisions moving forward, or to make those sort of design slash business decisions. But on an individual user by user basis, you can't really work out who gave you an answer, because you don't know if the answer that they gave you was the actual answer or a garbage answer that was thrown up. And these sorts of cryptographic controls and measures that can get put in place are so cool. I think that we can, first of all, I'm nowhere smart enough to be understanding any of these at a deep technical level. the I need to pay homage to these people who are deep mathematicians who come up with this sort of stuff, like unbelievably, literally that's who the word genius is reserved for, is the people who come up with these sorts of algorithms, you know. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. But what's
Yeah.
it, we need to inspire more of these, and we need to give them the funding that they need, and pay them back, right? So if Google implements, does a switch up over the next year, and everything is open sourced, and you can see they're implementing homographic encryption, they're implementing differential privacy like they are doing, and they're doing that across everything, and they're using that for all their data sources. Reward them for it, give them the pat on the back that they need, and they'll keep putting more money behind developing it further, behind funding researchers to develop even more privacy conscious um cryptographic solutions to these problems, and then other companies will follow suit and they'll do it too. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we have these solutions like homomorphic encryption and differential privacy and federated learning, and these solutions are amazing. And my only stipulation with that is just be faster, implement this more. Just
Yeah.
yeah, federated learning is implemented in only a couple of Google products. It is actually, to be fair, Google has open sourced some of them already. So, like for example, keyboard suggestions that has been released to the IOSP. So that's actually pretty cool. But beyond that, there hasn't been too much implementation and deployment of these technologies, and that's my problem. Like Microsoft has developed some of them, but never implemented any of them. So, like, what the hell? and
Yeah.
that's what I want. I want more of it, and I'm not sure what to do to get there. But as you said, it's good to give credit where credit is due, and we shouldn't just say that all these companies are just horrible and evil and nothing good can ever come out of them, because they do employ some of the best minds in the world. And for as much as these minds are allowed to, they are really trying hard to do the best they can. And when they come up with these ideas like homomorphic encryption, which is like, what? That's so crazy. Like, you can do
Yeah.
that? Like
How is
that
it
would
possible?
yeah, that would solve so many problems. Like, the NSA mass surveillance would be pretty much rendered useless because they would never be able to collect the data. They would just have junk. They wouldn't be able to decrypt it. There would be nothing that they could do with that. So that would be awesome.
That bring up a whole other fight, won't it? As you said, you're Australian. Oh, but we need to decrypt it all to for uh my my safety and
Yeah.
my police force. Yeah.
I don't know how much time you have left, because I have one more question, but that's maybe too long to answer.
No, no, go on, hit me.
All right. So you said that the problem is with the private sector and with the public sector. So we've talked a lot about how the private sector got it wrong. What do you think? I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but do you think the Estonians got it right when it comes to their e-government project?
No, I'm not really familiar with
Okay.
that. What's
So I could just maybe just briefly just introduce you into this. So basically, Estonia, after the Soviet Union collapsed, tried to go their own way, and they didn't have any infrastructure, no roads, nothing. So they decided to deliver public services over internet, and they basically provide like 99% of their government services in a digital form only. And the only ones where you actually have to like show up with some paperwork are marriage and house purchase and funeral. And
Jesus?
everything else is completely digitalized. And they hand out these small ID cards that have a biometric chip in them, and You basically sign all your government documents with it, you pay your taxes with it, it's your driver's license, it's everything in one place. It's compartmentalized to an extent. So, for example, if you're stopped, like a routine police stop, they only have access to like your driver's license information on that card. They don't have access to your health record. And then your doctor only has access to the data that you allow them to see on your card. They don't have access to, your financial records or whatever. So, like, in 2007, Estonia was actually attacked by a cyber attack from most likely Russia. It sort of came from everywhere. And kind of like, just to get your general perspective, is this a good idea to like digitalize governments even more, or would you be more they can also vote online. They've been doing that since 1997, I think, and like they have like all of their elections are pretty much online only at this point.
Yeah, I've just been scrolling through this as you were talking, listening to you. Estonia, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Estonia story, scrolling through. Oh my God, they got everything going. E-health, e-tax. Oh my God, e-prescriptions. That's mad. Yeah. Look, I think this is a huge debate that's going on now, with regards to whether elections can be done digitally safely, whether other stories. But look, if these are doing it now, they're proving it can be done, I suppose. Whether it's safe or not. Obviously, Estonia isn't the most geopolitically enticing target, of course. The United States, the United Kingdom, if they were to implement this sort of a system, um, they would probably be way under a lot more scrutiny. It would be attacked daily. Uh, and I think it can be done, but it needs to be done right. And it's the same with, as I said before, with these large private companies and stuff. Like, it can be done. We can fix these systems, and they can be done securely and reworked. It's about having the time, the amount of time it would take, and the amount of care that needs to be given to it. But if the appropriate amount of care and thought can be put into it beforehand, right? Again, if we were going to be doing something like this, I'd want boards on top of boards, and I'm sure there probably is, of experts, serious experts, not your average Joe Schmo politician there who read his uh, 5 minute read snippet on what's it, the forum, like, so actual experts who make these decisions. I'm very in favor of this sort of meritocracy level here, in this sort of a system. There's a lot of dangers, of course, that would need to be fleshed out. However, there's a lot of cryptography and cryptographic solutions that could be implemented to secure voting digitally, and to ensure that, um, I can't remember any of them off the top of my head, or I have a lot of notes on them actually. I might be able to get them to you later. Uh, but there are ways to secure these sorts of systems. Of course, again, it's the human factor that we have to be worrying about more so than the technical factor. It's will there be, for example, um, there a couple weeks ago, I seen a story. In the United Kingdom, they apparently, like a few, like 20 or 30,000 voter records were released or something like that. They emailed them to the wrong person.
Oh my
And then
God.
they sent an email up after it. Your one who sent the email sent a follow up email saying all of this. stuff is publicly available on the voter registration website anyway if you look them up individually. And it's like, so their position is, this isn't a data breach, it's all technically available publicly. It's like, yeah, but looking up somebody's name and address and then pulling up their voter registration record is a bit different to emailing them 20,000 people's records in a nice Excel format for them there, like, you know. Um, and it's the human factor that we kind of need to focus on here. But I definitely think it can be done, and it might be the way to go in the future. I don't know about any country y'all are in, but they really don't want to. They really want to make it hard to kind of go do these things where I'm staying anyway, you know. So and I'm sure a lot of activist groups abroad that I know of, like, you know, um, I hear a lot of, I'm not sure because I'm not American, in case you couldn't tell. But I could, in case I didn't convince you there, but let's say, from an external point of view, there seems to be a lot of media coverage on the fact that um, certain groups are making it hard for other groups to go vote. And, you know, there's voter registration booths being closed across certain counties. So if one demographic wants to vote, they have to travel across massive distances and then wait tens of hours in lines. And, you know, so this could solve that problem. If everybody could do it online or do it digitally, that could solve that problem. But again, it's unbelievable amounts of um research would need to go into it, you know. And I'm not calling myself, I wouldn't call anybody an expert, you know, on anything. I think that that title is um, very should be reserved to quite a high standard. Like, you know, uh, somebody calls themselves an expert on Python or an expert in C++. No, I'm sorry. Unless you are sitting on the standardization board who decides the C++ standard every year, then I would not consider you an expert on that subject, you know, because it just goes too deep. And the more you research these topics, the more you realize they're just rabbit holes in and of themselves to fall down. So I would get, if I was doing this sort of a thing, I think the only real good way to do it is to have massive panels of cryptographers, mathematicians, security experts, all designing this system, modern, on modern infrastructure, probably with their own custom built solutions that get audited. And even then, it's just so hard. Like, it's hard. I need to do a lot more research into it to give you a full answer, you know, because it's just such a crazy complex topic, man. That's mad. I was completely unaware of that. Estonia. I'll definitely be doing a lot of looking into that one. Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry I couldn't give you a more a more specific answer. It's just it's that's a very tough one.
yeah, this is definitely something that deserves to be studied on its own. And there have been some studies, there have been some issues with the system as well. There have been some vulnerabilities. I think they had one recently, and what they did is they just remotely reset all of the ID cards and they reissued new ones. And
Wish
it
that could
seems
happen
like
in Ireland.
I'm sorry?
No, I just said I wish they could do that in Ireland where all the PPS numbers were gone.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking about because they really seem to have thought about a lot. Definitely, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
say everything that, but they really did think about a lot of things. And there's definitely gonna be some issues, and maybe there is a point about that. You know, they're not the biggest geopolitical target. However, they are a target of Russia because there is a huge Russian population in Estonia. It's like a third of the country. It's a small country, but nonetheless, it used to be part of the Soviet Union. It used to be part of the Tsarist Russia, and Russia has never ceased claiming that territory of the Baltics. So there's been, and that cyber attack, that was actually, some people say that it was actually an incident of cyber war, like an actual warfare between nation states. And Russia obviously denied that it came from them. There is some evidence that it could have come from them, but nothing conclusive. So yeah, this is just an interesting project that I wanted to hear your opinion on, because it is I've covered it on my channel 2 times by now, and in one case I sort of like trash talked it, because when it comes to securing elections, you kind of like have to have confidentiality of the voter. You don't want to reveal the information, but also want to have the integrity of the vote. So how do you ensure both? How do you ensure that the vote is anonymous, but then it's not fraudulent, it's not double voting or any of these schemes that could happen, and it has not been tampered with in transit or on arrest, or at rest rather. So all these kinds of issues. But yeah, that's the point. Like, once you touch the surface of security, there is there is no there is no end. Like, it can go so deep on this, and it's kind of like going back to that statement that you made, that you're not gonna make it secure. Like, it's always gonna be vulnerable to some attacks, and even if it's perfectly technologically secure, you're gonna have human elements that are gonna be exploitable, and it's it's a very unique concept, because when you talk about other engineering, like industries, you have, kind of a lot of reassurances in those. Like in electrical engineering, like no one is afraid that they're gonna get electrocuted by their TV or fridge or electric shower even, or no one fears that their building is going to collapse on them. Like, it happens, it happens more in less developed countries. It's very rare in completely developed countries, advanced societies, but it can happen. But it's so rare that no one even thinks about it. And even if it happens, it's like usually due to some pretty catastrophic natural causes. Buildings don't usually collapse on their own. When it comes to, like, I don't know, I wanted to say like automobile security, but that's pretty fucked up. But yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
like
definitely.
the people. I think that people are actually like struggling to grasp the concept that we are using these systems so heavily, and we are trusting these computer systems. And in reality, we probably shouldn't trust them. We probably shouldn't be relying on them as much as we do, at such a level of integration, and such a disregard for securing them properly.
Yeah, and what's another thought as well, like it has to go even further, right? For something this serious, we can't even be thinking about what's technologically secure today. We have to think about what this has to be technologically secure forever, you know? This can't be a thing where in 20 years' time, quantum computing becomes mainstream and now voter registrations historically can be decrypted by criminals and be exposed, and then people's political opinions can be used against them, you know? So this needs to be secured for today, but then also secured going into the future. And that's the problem. We don't know tomorrow, next week, next year, 10 years from now, there could become a massive protocol level vulnerability in AES or something that we never even seen before, and all of a sudden everything that was ever encrypted with that symmetrically or with RSA or elliptic curve decalman or whatever, um, and all of a sudden anything that ever used to those can be decrypted now. Uh, so it's so there's so many different avenues that need to be thought about. Honestly, the more I think about it, the less confident I am in saying that it can be done with enough people on it. But I don't know, man. I'd say there should be sort of at least for now, I'd say this would need to be something that you'd want to sit on for a good 10 years, have it really like thoroughly analyzed first, because if we want, and it's not just about, you mentioned the confidentiality and the integrity, which are the key important parts, but also the third part of the triad, the availability of it, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
want on election day. Sure, you've seen it yourself, okay, with the previous American elections, um, and the fact that so many hundreds of thousands of mail-in votes or millions of mail-in votes were discarded, um, in certain states because they were a few minutes out of the deadline or something like that, you know. And if you're implementing those sort of time-sensitive systems, you can't have it built in such a way that, well, say if an adversary, be it Russia, be it China, be it North Korea, be it Iran, be it whoever, um, okay, well, they want the next president of the United States to be a Democrat, or they want the next president of the United States to be a Republican. So now they will DOS the shit out of Republican or Democrat states so that they can't vote and their votes are no longer counted because they weren't done in time. You know, keep ensuring the availability of these systems, I think, would be an even bigger challenge than ensuring the confidentiality and integrity of the data itself. Um, there's just so many layers. The more it's like oh god, talk about onion. Like, you know, it's every single time you think about it, there's just something else that stands out. I don't know. Uh, I think if something like America wanted to target this, and they put their full weight of their cyber command and NSA behind this, I think they could influence this very, if they wanted to. You know, if they put enough resources and time behind it, I think they could do it. Not that they need to. I'm sure that they'd come up with easier ways to influence the elections of smaller countries. I think America is very experienced in that regard. But however, um, what's if they wanted to, there probably is some way, somehow, somewhere. You know. But yeah, it's just that's just crazy. The more you think about it, the deeper it goes. Um, yeah, sorry. You may tell me to shut up. I'll just keep talking if you don't, if you don't tell me to stop.
No, it's this is why you're here, so that you can talk as much as you want, and it's not for me to talk, and it's not for me to tell you to shut up. I mean, you're the one with the experience, with the story to tell, and I've told my story multiple times over, and it's getting boring on my YouTube channel. So it's good to have you here. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, feel free to add or say anything that you want. I don't want to stop you at all. I'm just trying to carry this conversation through some of the points that we have laid out, but it's fascinating, man. I mean, it's it's something like we went from you being this scary hacker man to an activist to I don't know what we are now doing, but it's really like uh such an amazing opportunity to have someone like you here, because like I'm sure that you realize this, but I still want to reiterate it, that it means a lot to me and it means a lot to everyone who is listening to this, because like we don't get to have conversations with people like you on everyday basis. It's very rare, and in many cases, you know, you said that you don't really have that many people to talk about with about this, and in real life, maybe the people like you are not even so open to talk about that because of social stigma or something, like, oh, I don't want to talk about security or privacy, I'm not paranoid, I have nothing to hide, or whatever, all these sentiments. And I'm so grateful that you came here, and I'm so grateful that we had this chance to open up, and I'm really grateful that you opened up about your frustrations with this, because it is kind of emotional, it's kind of personal, and I to be honest, I didn't expect that at all, and I'm really grateful that you did this.
Yeah, look, I'm bullshit free personally. I'm very I have strong ethics. I have a strong belief system that I go through, and I just think it's very important. I love the work of the integrity is more so than anything else, and I'm lucky enough to live in a country where I'm not going to be like let die if it slips out who I am and I got sacked or something like that, And so I couldn't give less of a shit personally, Like one time in one of the places I was at, somebody said like, "Oh, I can't wait till we get up to this size and then we can start doing security testing and security research." And I was like, "Yeah, man, that's going to be awesome." And he's like, "And then we can start developing our own exploits and then keeping them in a database for ourselves." And I was like, "No, bro, if that happens, I'm going to out everybody here, like, straight up. Like, you don't want to be telling me that of all people, because I swear to God, like, I'll end that pretty quickly. What the hell?" Because I think the problem with engineers, I think, is look at China, look at America even. Like, we think it's so cool because we're all nerds and we love doing this sort of stuff. We love building these facial recognition softwares because we can. It's so awesome that we can do this. It is so cool. And even myself, I think it's bloody awesome. However, it's the impact that we need to think about of these decisions, right? So now an authoritarian regime, call it as it is, a dictator in China, is using this to oppress their population. And that's the effect that this has, and it's going the same way in other countries. It's going the same way in even in the United Kingdom, where they're implementing this facial recognition technology all over the place. It's going that way in other countries also, and I think engineers, and I think developers have a a responsibility to reflect on things before they agree to do it. Um, People are given these ethics courses, and it's just kind of taught as a boring thing. It's a boring subject of, oh yeah, think about things before you do it. Implement security. You don't want to break people's privacy, blah blah blah, and it's so boring. And people want to get past it. But I think that's a really people are. It's not. It needs to be put to people in the way with the respect that it deserves. In that you have a lot of power, and you're going to be given a lot of power, and you're going to be asked to implement things in your lifetime as a developer or as an engineer. You're going to be asked to build systems that may be awesome and cool, and you might really want to work on these systems, but you have to think about the impact that that could have. If your company tomorrow gets turned around and told, here's gone, like, okay, here's an example, man. If I asked you, if the American government now turned around tomorrow and said, here's $10 million, take it or leave it, we'll give you this, and if you give us the identity of this dude, you know, it's so hard because there's so much money on the table. You get to work on this cool project. You get to be this cool special agent working for the government. It sounds awesome, getting lots of money, but the impact that that could have on a person's life, or more importantly, on the mass population's life, the general public's lives, yeah, that's more important. And that's what I'm trying to get at as the sort of crux of the issue is people need to focus on that more than I think they are doing currently. And I I would consider myself an activist. I think you know the Snowden leaks, and and watching content like yourselves has kind of brought that out in me more than I already had, because I take it very seriously now, and I, as I said, I've got no bullshit in me. I don't bullshit. If I get something wrong, I'll call it out. That's what being in the academic community is all about. um, let's say, and if I don't know something, as I said, I'm not familiar on this, I'll do that. I'm not really one to talk on this. I think that we should get experts in the room to talk about this. That's what I'm all about. And yeah, funny enough, I'm a very private person, but I'm also a very open person. At the
Yeah.
same time, it's a bit of a contradiction.
Yeah, but it makes sense to me. I mean, I'm pretty private but open again. I mean, I'm all over the internet now, so yeah.
Not to brag or anything, it's like I'm kind of all over the. Yeah, no, what's
I mean,
definitely,
I
man.
just I just, like when I heard of the Snowden leaks, I really went down the rabbit hole and I just wanted to be as private as possible, but then I realized that, well, if I do it just for myself, like, then nothing's going to happen. So I just wanted to teach others, and I just wanted to, show that everyone can do it. I wanted to find a way so that people can actually, install better apps and help protect their own privacy and security, and sort of like be that medium towards what Snowden would, probably want to have in a world where he wouldn't want to die. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, yeah, you're doing a public service as well. That's why I love
Yeah, I
watching
mean,
your videos, and I love consuming that content, and helping out in any way I can. If you need any help, or you
mm,
want to talk, or you want to help research anything, or anything like that, like it's unbelievable. Like, I remember seeing how YouTube's pummeling your content into the ground, but it's a good service, and it needs to kind of be kept up. So everybody needs to go donate to your Patreon.
yeah, you're plugging my Patreon for me. I mean,
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not doing this as a businessman. I'm a terrible businessman. I couldn't run a business. I'm horrible. And I'm just, I kind of feel that I'm a nobody, and I'm just trying to hand over that cube and deliver that message, and that cube reference only makes sense to me now, I realize, but it doesn't matter. It will make sense when I update my logos. But it's kind of like, you know Snowden inspired me to do something with my life, and it wasn't even so much about privacy. It was that when he did this, he was at peace with himself. Anything could have happened to him and he would be at peace. And that was something that I wanted. Like, he decided to dedicate his entire life as a young 20 something year old security engineer, or whatever, security analyst. And he sacrificed a well-paid job to do something that could eventually put him in Guantanamo Bay for the rest of his life, and completely ruin him as a person. And he was at peace. He slept like a baby for 8 hours straight when he was in Hong Kong, and that was, to me, that was something like I cannot even express to this date what I felt. And it's kind of like that peace that I'm looking for, like being so clear with your consciousness, or conscious that like you've done your part, you did your best, no matter how your life went, how fucked up it might have been, how you've been on the wrong side in the past. You you decided to correct the course, and you did everything that you could to to do that. And kind of that's the kind of inspiration that changed the course of my life. And I'm trying to share that inspiration with others, and that's kind of like all that I'm doing. And if I cease to exist tomorrow, I'm perfectly okay with that, because I just want to do this for as long as I can, and once I can't, that's okay. So like, even if like nobody donates, that's fine. That's it. Like, I've done it, and people decided that it's no longer valuable. But for as long as it's possible, I'm just gonna do this, because I don't know what else I can do that's better than this. And there's plenty of things that I should be doing better, definitely. But I'm like really devoted to this. I'm really devoted into looking for things that I can do on this path, towards like this better world that I don't even know if it's possible. But I'm rambling about nonsense that probably no one cares about. But this is kind of like explaining my own motivation.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like that's what it's all about, man. And it's about, yeah, I definitely put myself on a similar road to yourself. Like that Snowden stuff. It's unbelievable, and watching him and watching his reading his books, and really getting in his mindset of how selfless it was. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was literally nothing he could have possibly gained from it. you know like it was literally just for what he seen to be as the greater good, because he had a belief, and it was being true to his, he was being, uh, keeping his integrity up, and yeah, look, I don't even know what to say anymore. I'm in complete agreement, and I think you do a great service, and I'm sure there's many more, engineers, and people who listen to yourself, who are who are professionals as well. And it's important, I think, that out of all people, that the engineers and professionals listen to this content even more so than the general public, because they're the ones at the end of the day who are being asked to implement these systems, and to build them, and to power us to this future. And we need a generation, I think, of engineers who are just ethical, and they have no ill will. They're not going to be swayed. I know it's a lot to ask for, but is it possible? I don't know. Is it a utopian world where people aren't going to be persuaded or bribed into building these horrible systems? I don't know, but the, you'll get depressed if you don't hope for the best. you know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just
that's
gotta
true.
literally been there, done that. As I said, I've gone down many the doomer hill. I'm sure you have as well, but
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
just gotta hope for the best and do as much as you can for that.
Yeah, the doomerism is real. The existential dread is real. I mean, it can get
100%.
overwhelming pretty fast, and it's kind of like at some point you're questioning yourself that if what you're doing is even worth it, if anyone even cares, if it's even the right thing to do. And at least that's kind of like what I sometimes do. And it's kind of like sometimes you can't really shake these negative thoughts away, but somehow I still return back to this. And I think it's I'm I don't know, I'm very skeptical of leaders and leadership as a whole, because there's just such a horrible lack of proper leadership and good leadership in today's world. But for me, Snowden is just such a massive inspiration, and exactly for that selfless act. Like, and that's kind of like what I want to achieve as well. Like, to be just completely selfless and do what needs to be done, and not even think about myself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was trying to get across earlier before I went on a tangent. Like, I'm lucky enough to be in this position, and what's it? So I couldn't give less of a shit whether I'm doing my security research on my own or whether I'm doing my security research as part of a team in a company somewhere. Um, my personal ethics and my personal integrity is what matters most to me. And I I don't honestly I don't think any amount of money could be put on the table to offer me to sway either way. Maybe not. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have the opinion that let's say everybody has a number, but I've always said like once I have a computer there and a roof over my head, I couldn't give less of a shit after that. I'm happy as Larry there with one with my computer there to do my research on, just good enough, which I've got, and a place to stay, which I've got. So after that, I don't do anything else. Like,
Hmm.
this is my work, but it's also my hobby. It's what I love doing, you know. So there's not really much more you can tempt me with after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is also inspiring to hear. Like that's true. Like you don't really need much in your life to be happy, and if you're on the right path, then that's what, gives you the motivation to just live. Because, there seems to be like this worship of just, like you're only successful if you can manifest wealth and just, richness and stuff like that. But like you can be great just, with basic stuff. We all need to eat. We all need to have, comfort at some point. But, beyond that, you can just be happy, and that's okay. Like that's fine. We don't all have to just, be in this race at the bottom and trying to overcome each other with how much wealth we can hoard, and like I see no point in that. So it's glad to know that there are more people like you out there, and definitely, like, if you want to come back on the show, I would definitely want to talk about some other stuff that we didn't have a chance to mention today, because we are now at almost 3.5 hour mark, and I'm pretty spent.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but it
Has it
went.
been 3.5 hours already? Fuck
Yeah,
me.
yeah, it went down pretty fast, and um, yeah, I think that if you are up for it, we should definitely do this again at some point. And if you want to, I would definitely want to collaborate with you some more, because your expertise, well, you don't like to call yourself an expert, so your professional experience, your your attitude, like this is all valuable, and I'm really glad and I appreciate that you are in this community. And yeah, people should hear more about you. Maybe if you have some content of your own that people can maybe read or something like that, or maybe you would want to make that on your own, that would be amazing, because I would definitely, like, if it's just in a written form, I would definitely read that. Like maybe some of your academic work or something like that. It's all valuable, and yeah, it's yeah, I'm just trying to, like, sort of like encourage you to put yourself out there maybe a little more. I'm not sure how much you do that online, but you have a lot of valuable information that you can share, and a lot of stories to tell. And if nowhere else, you can always do that on my channel.
Yeah, definitely, man. Look, as I said, I love to help out, and as much as I can. I I tend to be more of an observer at the moment. I don't know. I never really see myself as an interesting person to make anything for people. But sure. Look, if we, yeah, no, man. I'll definitely be looking into this Estonia thing a lot more. And what's it? Yeah, no. Any questions? I'd love to talk about it. Get a panel together, talk to people. I love listening to. The thing that I love as well is about listening to yourself and to other people is the different perspectives. Because that's the thing that 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 really gets me is how you can study something or I can study something for so long and think about it so much, and then you know I can watch a video of somebody else, or read an article or a paper from somebody else, and I think, shit, man, that was a good point of view, man. I never thought of that whatsoever, and then that's how learning happens, and that's what I love doing, So at any time, literally, and as I said, fuck me, nobody else likes talking about this stuff. So as much as you want, I have an entire lifetime of talking to do. So anytime.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, I definitely have more questions. So we should do something like this again in the future. I didn't think that we would reach this far. It's 3.5 hours, but we are definitely not even halfway through what we should or maybe need to talk about. So if you
Literally.
feel like coming on again, you're already invited, man.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't think we were gonna go this long either. I was saying to someone beforehand. She was asking me like, you know, oh, well, I'm gonna lock myself away now for a while. So yeah, I'll probably be gone like an hour. So 3.5 hours later, it's like, all right, there you go. Yeah, no, but definitely, I'd love to talk to you again. 100%. Definitely figure it out.
Yeah, thank you, man. This was awesome. So if you want to add anything else, feel free to do so. But for my part, I'm pretty spent.
Yeah, no, same man.
Okay.
It's good. Suppose I'll just add that again. I'll plug your Patreon last time.
Yeah, I didn't want to plug my Patreon too much because it's I mean I'm overwhelmed by the amount of support that I got recently, and I'm not even sure I deserve it because I don't know if I provide that much value, but I definitely want to fulfill my promise and just do as much as I can. But I mean, you are too
There you
generous,
see.
man.
Yeah, no, you see, I'm an independent party here. I'm speaking from the part of a viewer and a consumer of your content. I can say, man, this man needs to keep going. It's too valuable to stop. We can't let don't let the powers that be try and suppress this. It's, if nothing else, it's a platform for opinions to be shared.
Yeah, I
that
mean
that
it's
isn't that isn't mentioned anywhere else.
yeah.
I literally have very few other places, especially in video form, of this quality that even talks about these sorts of issues.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately likely that it will be hard for me to break out of this algorithmic bubble because there seemed to be some sort of a pattern where kind of like YouTube sort of like treats you like poorly for a prolonged period of time, and then you really have to like hit that algorithm again with some massive hit to get out of that bubble. So it's likely that for the next couple of weeks or even months, many of my videos will still receive very few views. And if I'm lucky again, I might hit that you know threshold where I just burst through that, but I'm not sure. But what I want to do for sure is that I don't want to care about the algorithm anymore. I don't want to care about YouTube, promoting or not promoting my stuff. I just want to make the best content I can. And now I want to be even more open to inviting like professionals and experts and people like you, people like uh, developers of projects like Graphene OS and others, and have that even more of a community effort than just me talking out of my ass. I mean, I'm sourcing all of my all of my materials, but I don't want to be the only person that people ever hear about. So I'm really glad that that you came on again. I said it like 10 times, but I this is the direction that I want to be going in, and hopefully this will make even more educational content.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said yourself, like, you have such an incredible ratio of like likes and comments, and it's unbelievable the amount of them compared to other places, and it's like, I think there is a community there that are willing to bolster this up, and share it and get it out there. So you'll do well, man. And as you said, we're all here to help as well. So be going good. I'll I suppose I've talked the ear off you now. It's geez, nearly 20 minutes off 4 hours going on. So I'll,
Yeah.
I told you if you don't tell me to shut up, I'll keep talking, and I did. So we're done now, I suppose. Have a good one.
Yeah, have a good one, man. Thank you again. And yeah, goodbye, everybody.